Chapter 1249. Yin Ping controlled his temper and quietly inquired about it. The feedback he got from various parties made him sneer. A family that had been in decline for a long time had used a favor owed by the sage to exchange for this quota. It was said that the sage was not very happy about this, so there was nothing to worry about. How dangerous was the Lost Garden? Was it a place that anyone could enter? If they barely squeezed in without the qualifications, the biggest possibility was that they would lose their lives. Therefore, Qin Yu found that the eldest disciple of the Dragon Mountain Sage was very enthusiastic towards him, as if they were brothers who had finally met after being separated for so many years. Of course, they were not brothers, so there was most likely a demon behind this. Qin Yu's face was filled with panic and gratitude, and his acting was flawless. After all, after experiencing many things, one would find that good acting skills were sometimes very important and could even save one's life. It was not difficult to feign civility, so he could just deal with it first. In any case, he could leave after entering the Lost Garden. It had to be said that the Yard Master's disguise technique was really amazing. Even the Dragon Mountain Sage could not sense anything wrong in front of her. This made Qin Yu feel relieved. It seemed that as long as he kept a low profile, the chances of being discovered were not high. After staying for 2 days, his eldest senior brother and the others had already set off for a long time. Just as Qin Yu could not help but mutter to himself, the people of the Dragon Mountain Holy Land finally set off. Including Qin Yu, there were a total of 5 people and 1 beast. The 5 people were burdens, and this beast was the main character. Qin Yu had memorized the contents of the Jade Slip, so he naturally knew about this. Although the name Lost Garden was given by modern cultivators, the truth was that this place was prepared by powerful ancient beings to continue their bloodline. Only those with a recognized bloodline were allowed to enter. Unfortunately, this final inheritance was destined to be divided up, and only a small portion of it could be obtained by the descendants of ancient beings. Of course, it was also possible that the extinct ancient beings had already anticipated this. Otherwise, they would not have left a loophole that allowed their descendants to bring people in. Losing money to avoid disasters to protect their descendants was probably referring to this kind of thing. Qin Yu casually thought about it, but on the surface, he was very reserved. He lowered his head, as if he had no idea what to do, and just followed the crowd. Yin Ping laughed heartily. He brought the young man beside him and chatted with the 2 people in front of him. Both sides laughed from time to time, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. Seeing Qin Yu not respond, Yin Ping intentionally shifted the topic to him several times. Qin Yu barely managed to say a few words before he couldn't continue. In his heart, he was thinking that he was about to enter the severed garden. So where did he have the time to waste with them? Yin Ping laughed coldly in his heart, thinking that he had done enough. Even if someone died after this, he wouldn't be suspected. Finally, he smiled apologetically at Qin Yu and turned his head away, concentrating on speaking with the 2 people across from him. It was a man and a woman. Both of them were quite good-looking, and their eyebrows and eyes were somewhat similar. Perhaps they were related by blood. Tan Hai was conversing with Yin Ping when he glanced at his cousin's sister from the corner of his eyes. He couldn't help but frown. Of course, the extent of the frown was very small, and it disappeared in a flash. Even if one looked carefully, one might not be able to notice it. Outsiders might not be able to see anything, but he had a deep understanding of his cousin. Naturally, he could sense that there was something different about her at this moment. Taking advantage of the gap in their conversation, Tan Hai lightly coughed and brought up the topic of conversation with his cousin. Their gazes met for a moment before slipping away. The transmission began. After experiencing the transmission method of the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands, Qin Yu realized that the ultra-long distance transmission he had performed before was already of the highest quality. Now, this was what could be called wretched. With a ripping sound, space was torn apart, and the 5 people and 1 beast hurried in. This was called a jolt. That's right, the mountain pangolin had an ancient life bloodline, but its name was very rustic. Perhaps it was the first time it had experienced this kind of transmission, so it was startled. This fellow was massive and took up most of the transmission space. As it tossed and turned, several people swayed along with it. Qin Yu couldn't appear, as if he didn't move at all. That would be the same as telling others that there was a problem with him and that they should come and suspect him. Even though he hadn't entered the Lost Garden, his acting skills still had to be up to par. Chin Yu swayed along with it, occasionally calling out in a low voice. Then, in the next moment, he felt as if he had knocked over someone. His arms slammed into the ground, and he hurriedly swayed to the other side. Yin Ping actually had some skill. He was able to calm down the startled mountain pangolin. The violently shaking transmission finally stabilized a little. Shua! Light suddenly descended. The transmission was over. Chin Yu hurriedly closed his eyes and then opened them again. He looked around with a bit of panic in his eyes, perfectly displaying the performance he should have. Acting was something that could be a bit addictive. Once he started, he would unconsciously want to perform better. Just as Chin Yu thought his acting skills had improved, his eyes met a pair of eyes. The girl blushed, and she couldn't help but glare at him. Chin Yu maintained his composure and pretended not to see anything. He looked away, puzzled. There were so many people, and it was so dark. So how did they know it was him? Yin Ping took a deep breath. He smiled and said, "Everyone, we have arrived. The Lost Garden will soon open, so let's find a place to settle down first." After he finished speaking, he quickly led the others away. He had no choice but to be fast. In a short time that he had just arrived after breaking through space, he could feel eyes locking onto him from all directions. None of them were good to provoke, and some of them even made him feel as if he was being burned by fire. In fact, this was also the first time that Yin Ping had participated in the opening of the Lost Garden. He was secretly shaken, but he also couldn't help but feel a fiery heat. In addition to the rumors he had heard before, his expectations towards the Lost Garden had risen to the highest point. If everything went smoothly this time, he might be able to find that sea, and there would be hope for him to step onto the divine path. As Yin Ping was excited, he didn't forget how his junior apprentice sister had kicked him in the balls of his flesh. Even now, he could clearly remember that pleasurable feeling. He turned to look at Chin Yu and immediately revealed a warm and generous smile. "Brat, I'll let you jump around a bit longer. Once we enter the Lost Garden, that will be the day you die." The people from the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands hadn't arrived early, and all the good spots had been taken. Yin Ping didn't have any other thoughts, and honestly chose a place where there was no one around. Anyone that had the qualifications to come here today wasn't an ordinary character. It was best to forget about trying to cause trouble for oneself. After exchanging a few more words, everyone settled down. For cultivators, unless it was an extremely shore environment, it was very simple to find a place to stay. Across from him, a man and woman took out a small palace. It swelled in the wind and quickly expanded. They bowed and entered. Long Feng's eyes widened. He couldn't help but lick his lips. He nudged his senior apprentice brother with his shoulder. "Yin Ping, what do you think of this palace?" Yin Ping nodded. He said in a low voice, "It's very unusual. It seems that the family that traded with Honorable Master has some background." Long Feng sneered. "It's not just background. I'm afraid there are other reasons why they deliberately walked through our family's door. This palace, I've seen it before. The old man refused to buy it for me. Its value is astonishing." As he spoke, he glanced at the closed palace doors. After walking some distance away, he summoned his own palace. It wasn't bad, but there were always comparisons. Long Feng sighed twice and then pushed open the doors and walked in. Yin Ping sneered inwardly. "In terms of eyesight, I can throw you off by 80 streets. If it weren't for the fact that you cultivated your reincarnation technique well, would you even have the qualifications to serve me tea right now? For someone like you to have ideas about other people's girls, you might as well rest early." Without changing his expression, Yin Ping turned and asked Chin Yu whether or not he wanted to rest with him. After being politely declined, he smiled and said, "Junior apprentice brother Chin, there is no need to be nervous. If that's the case, then I won't say anything more." Being kind to others and having an elegant demeanor, this was probably how he was acting right now. It was said that the more noble one's background was, the more importance they placed on personal character. This was because other families weren't too bad. Perhaps I might even be noticed by that girl. This is a lucky chance. Thinking of this, Yin Ping's smile became even purer. He nodded to Chin Yu and then waved his hand to summon his palace. Who? Qin Yu let out a light breath. It was truly difficult for him to endure. If this fellow didn't leave soon, he would have vomited from disgust. With this, he still wanted to attract a girl? His courage was commendable. He didn't take out any palace or anything like that. As a junior from an impoverished family, he had come here bearing the fate of his family, so he had to perform perfectly. He was about to enter the Lost Garden. He couldn't allow any accidents to occur at the last moment. He walked to a quiet place and sat down. Qin Yu looked at the endless fog in the distance. Was the Lost Garden here? He couldn't see it at all. As Qin Yu looked at the fog with puzzlement in his heart, he didn't know that there were also people looking at him with puzzlement. The explorer furrowed his brows, then furrowed his brows again. However, he was unable to find anything different about the brat outside. He was just an ordinary nobody who didn't seem to have any background. So how could he be worth his cousin secretly paying attention to? Although he already knew that his cousin was the president of the Appearance Association, this boy surnamed Qin didn't seem handsome at all. Sangju, do you know this boy? In his opinion, this was the only possibility. I don't know him. Sangju blushed red. I would never know such a shameless person. The explorer hesitated for a moment. Do you have any grudges before? Sangju glared at him. Cousin, aren't you annoying? Why do you keep asking random questions? I don't even know this person, so how could there possibly be any grudges between us? The explorer was left speechless. He also couldn't figure it out. You don't know him, and you don't have any grudges with him. So why do you want to see him gnash his teeth and then abandon him after being toyed with? Cousin, this brother of yours is really fascinated by you. Sangju hatefully glared at Qin Yu. This bastard, he was actually so calm and didn't reveal any abnormalities at all. Although her breasts weren't too big, a touch was still a touch. It was impossible for her not to feel anything. Keep pretending. I want to see you continue pretending. I already thought there was a problem with you before, and now I know it's definitely the case. If it were a boy without any background, would he be able to perform like this? Humph, just you wait. I will definitely grab hold of your pigtails and expose you. Qin Yu thought his performance was perfect, but he never imagined that he would expose himself from this angle. If he knew, he would be left speechless. Wasn't he just carelessly touching her, and there really wasn't much of a feeling? Was there a need to be so relentless? Chapter 1250. The Lost Garden was indeed within the fog. When the first fluctuation came from the depths of the fog, it swept out like a wave, instantly attracting everyone's attention. A sharp light flashed in Qin Yu's eyes. No wonder he hadn't found his eldest senior apprentice brother and the others. They had already entered. Of course, it wasn't just his eldest senior apprentice brother and the others who entered first. There were over a dozen other figures, and Qin Yu recognized one of them. It was West Mountain's 9 Heads, who had been blocked by his eldest senior apprentice brother at the East Sea's birthday banquet. As expected, Sage Scholatry's disciples had also arrived. Fortunately, they were prepared. If they were discovered by 9 Heads, there would be a fierce battle. Third senior apprentice brother Bai Feng had a calm expression as he stood beside his eldest senior apprentice brother. Behind him was Lei Xiaoyu. Qin Yu couldn't help but glance at her. The feeling this little girl gave off didn't seem quite right. At this moment, Lei Xiaoyu frowned as if she had sensed something. Qin Yu hurriedly lowered his head and looked away. This little girl's senses were so sharp. It seemed that he had underestimated her strength before. It hadn't been too long since they parted that year, but Lei Xiaoyu's strength had increased to such an astonishing degree. This filled Qin Yu with confidence in the Garden Master's ability to teach disciples. At the same time, he looked forward to the Lost Garden. If the Garden Master had gone through so much trouble to let him enter, the lucky chances inside would definitely not be disappointing. Humph! They're from the Peach Garden. Yin Ping sneered in a low voice. Qin Yu glanced at him. Just one sentence was enough to determine that the relationship between the Dragon Mountain Holy Land and the Peach Garden wasn't too good. TSK. The Garden Master had good methods. Even in this situation, she could still use the Dragon Mountain Holy Land to smoothly let him enter the Lost Garden. It should also be out of consideration for his safety. No one would have thought that the disciples of the Peach Garden would be hiding among the cultivators of the Dragon Mountain Holy Land. Long Feng suddenly said, "Senior apprentice brother, why did the people of the Peach Garden enter the fog first?" Yin Ping's face stiffened. He thought that this was a stupid question. The reason they could enter first was because they were strong. If you were strong, you could also do it. But the problem was that he had just sneered and expressed his hostility towards the Peach Garden. Now, he found it difficult to explain. Tan Hai chuckled and helped him out of his predicament. It is rumored that the seal of the Lost Garden is unsealed once every 10,000 years. It requires the bloodline of the most powerful ancient era's life forms to be unsealed. As for the various factions that entered first, I believe that they all control the descendants of the highest level ancient life forms. He did not directly state the disparity in strength. Instead, he explained it from this aspect. Although everyone knew that it was impossible to protect the descendants of peak ancient era's organisms without strength, at the very least, he left them some face. Yin Ping gave him a grateful look and lightly coughed. What fellow Taoist Tan Hai said is correct. Of course, it's not like they didn't gain anything. When they open the seal, they can obtain an additional portion of the Lost Garden's power. Since these people have come out, it means that the seal has been opened. The entrance will open soon. Everyone, be careful. Qin Yu thought that it was no wonder his elder senior apprentice brother and the others had come several days in advance. It was clear that they were opening the seal and conveniently eating a bite first. But what Qin Yu didn't understand was that the White Phoenix and the Azure Dragon were undoubtedly top existences amongst the ancient era's life forms. So, why did only his elder senior apprentice brother and Lei Xiaoyu come to the Peach Garden? The Dragon Mountain Holy Lands only had a rather cowardly pangolin, yet 5 people had come. In comparison, the Peach Garden should be able to obtain at least several dozen spots. His eyes turned and fell onto Nine-Headed. Beside him were clearly cultivators from the West Mountain Holy Lands, but there were only 2 of them. Looking at the 3 of them, there was a strange beast with a body as black as jade and a fierce and dignified appearance. It was clear that its rank wasn't low. Qin Yu didn't recognize the others, but if they could stand side by side with the Peach Garden and West Mountain and enter the fog first, they clearly weren't ordinary people. Looking carefully, the number of people was also in 2s and 3s. They clearly could have brought more people, but didn't. Was it because the benefits of the Lost Garden weren't great? Dee ruled out this possibility after a moment's thought. The reason was simple. If there weren't enough benefits, would so many holy lands participate? If the elder senior apprentice brother of the Peach Garden loved to go into seclusion and cultivate, would he personally lead a team? Then there was only one possibility left. The benefits were great, but at the same time, it was extremely dangerous. Thus, everyone agreed to reduce the number of people in order to avoid unnecessary losses. Thinking about it this way, the Lost Garden was likely even more dangerous than they had imagined. Lei Xiaoyu, this girl had specifically reminded him not to run around in the near future. She was likely worried that Qin Yu would hear about the Lost Garden and have some thoughts. But shouldn't you be more concerned about yourself first? Although I admit that I underestimated your strength before, aren't you afraid of losing your little life by following elder senior apprentice brother here? Qin Yu frowned inwardly. This matter was naturally arranged by the garden master. He really couldn't figure out just what sort of logic this was. Even if second senior apprentice brother was punished to clean up the wine cellar, there were still others. For instance, 7th senior apprentice sister who changed her face every day. Her strength was absolutely heaven-defying. 7th senior apprentice sister? Qin Yu's heart raced. His eyes carefully swept over Lei Xiaoyu's body. As he thought about the strange feeling he had before, as well as this girl's unexpectedly sharp senses, it couldn't be, right? If this was really the case, then Honorable Master must have some idea this time. Did he want to trick West Mountain's Nine-Headed? That was highly possible. After all, based on his impression of the Garden Master, she wasn't someone who would suffer losses and swallow her blood. During the trip to the East Sea, Sage Scholatry had dared to touch Peach Girl. Although he didn't succeed in the end, he had still caused problems for Peach Girl. The Garda Master definitely couldn't tolerate this. Thinking of this, Chinyu suddenly felt a little excited. West Mountain was also his enemy, and Sage Scholatry didn't dare to think about it for now. But if he could kill Nine-Headed first, that would be an incomparably wonderful matter. Perhaps he could even provide some help. Taking a deep breath to calm his mind, Chinyu told himself to stay calm and wait until he entered the Lost Garden. Although killing Nine-Headed was important, what was even more important was to obtain the lucky chance that the ancient organisms had prepared for their juniors, the source of life. According to what was written in the Jade Slip, this was simply an extremely potent tonic soup. Soaking in it would not only strengthen the body, but it could also enhance the cultivation of the soul. It was simply tailor-made for Chinyu, a medicine that could make the bottle even stronger and stronger. Although everything was fine right now, and there weren't any abnormalities, no one knew which would come first, an accident or tomorrow. Chinyu didn't wish for someday, in the future, to suddenly explode like a giant firecracker. True divinity path, he hadn't even seen the benefits yet, but there were already a pile of hidden dangers. Yin Ping excitedly roared out, "It's open." Chinyu's random thoughts were immediately interrupted. He looked towards the fog. It seemed as if an extremely formidable strength was being released from within, forming a shockwave that swept out in all directions. But soon after, a formidable swallowing strength descended. The devouring power descended, and all the rolling clouds that had been blasted away were fiercely pulled back. Then, the clouds exploded and scattered without a trace. In the blink of an eye, all that was left was a pitch-black hole that appeared in front of everyone. It was indeed pitch-black and large. This hole was at least 10,000 feet wide and incomparably dark. Looking at it made it seem as if one would be forcefully pulled in. An aura that was coarse and savage mixed with the endless passage of time was released from it. It was as if a peak ancient creature had crossed the river of time and opened its eyes. With a single glance, it could see the entire world, and it naturally enveloped everyone in the world. Chinyu's chest tightened. In the next moment, his heart began to violently beat. A roar sounded out from deep within his mind. His abyssal titan bloodline began to show signs of erupting uncontrollably. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his racing heartbeat. Chinyu used a great deal of strength to prevent himself from transforming into an abyssal titan. He let out a breath of relief and turned his head to meet Song Zhu's eyes. This woman had a sneer on her face, and there were 4 words written on her face. "I've caught you." Chinyu's first thought was that this woman's senses were quite sharp. Then, he wondered if it was too late to silence her now. The good news was that after sneering, Song Zhu looked away and didn't do anything else. Chinyu hesitated for a moment. Then, he decided to temporarily suppress his thoughts. These 2 people weren't people from the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands. They were all outsiders, so it would be best if they minded their own business. Of course, what was more important was that this man and woman, Tanhai and Song Zhu, gave off a feeling that they weren't easy to deal with. Killing someone had never been an easy matter. One had to have a pair of bright eyes. Otherwise, if they chose the wrong target, it would be nothing more than a farce of sending themselves to their deaths. Peach Garden, West Mountain, and the other influences that had first opened the seal took the lead. The first batch of cultivators entered the black hole and vanished. Then, it was the turn of the other influences. Yin Ping said in a low voice, "Everyone, you must stick close to the mountain pangolin and seal away your own aura." He looked at Chinyu. "Junior apprentice brother Chin, especially you. You might feel a bit uncomfortable during the process, but you must endure it, otherwise there will be problems." Chinyu thanked him with gratitude. Yin Ping gently smiled and waved his hand, trying his best to maintain an appearance that said he was a warm-hearted person and there was no need to thank him. He glanced around and felt a bit disappointed. Miss Song Zhu didn't seem to be looking at him at all. It must be because of the opening of the Lost Garden. There was no need to worry. There would be more chances in the future. However, if this was the case, then in order to display his noble and pure charisma, he wouldn't be in a hurry to kill Chinyu. After all, he needed a tool that could help him display his true self. The order of entry was enough to determine their positions. When almost half of the people entered, Yin Ping waved his hand. "Let's go." The mountain pangolin's eyes had already turned red, and its bloodline was restless. It suddenly roared out loud. When the 5 people landed on its body, its 4 thick hooves stomped the ground, and it shot forwards. The entire process proceeded smoothly. Besides Tan Hai and Songzhu suddenly tensing up, this couldn't be hidden from everyone's eyes. Long Feng rushed to say, "Miss Songzhu, there is no need to be afraid. As long as you stick close to the mountain pangolin, there will be no problems." He had the appearance of an experienced Taoist priest, but he didn't realize that this was also his first time entering the Lost Garden. Yin Ping sneered inwardly. Speaking too much was just too shameful. He really didn't think of this playboy Long Feng as his opponent. Chapter 12:51. Qin Yu lowered his head, his eyes flashing. Just now, he had sensed something strange. He felt as if he had been locked onto by a terrifying pair of eyes. It was very weak. If he hadn't confirmed it with the old turtle, Qin Yu might have suspected that it was an illusion. And it just so happened that Tan Hai and Songzhu suddenly tensed up at this time. Although the 2 of them reacted quickly, they couldn't help but reveal a trace of panic in their eyes. Qin Yu immediately felt reassured. Since everyone wanted a problem, then the big brother wouldn't laugh at the second brother. If there was no problem, then no one would cause trouble. Thinking for a moment, he lightly coughed. His eyes met Songzhu's, but his meaning was already transmitted. "I've also caught onto your weakness." Strangely, Songzhu immediately understood the meaning in Qin Yu's eyes. He immediately clenched his teeth in hatred. This shameless fellow, he was truly sinister. He had actually hidden himself so deeply. "Humph humph, but you are far too naive. We will soon enter the Lost Garden. At that time, I will let you know just how terrifying a woman's revenge is." They arrived at the black hole. They entered. Qin Yu's consciousness instantly emptied out. This was beyond his expectations. Luckily, no danger arrived. A series of deep and solemn syllables rang out in his mind, like a great bell or a peal of thunder. These syllables were unfamiliar and revealed traces of ancient time. But, for some unknown reason, Qin Yu understood their meaning. To sum it up, it could be summarized as, "Welcome home." There was another tremor in his ears. Then, Qin Yu felt his consciousness return to his body. He opened his eyes. Sunlight poured down from above. His eyes felt a stabbing pain, and tears began to flow down. He didn't dare to close his eyes. He could only force himself to squint and slowly sweep his eyes around, barely able to make out his surroundings. His first impression was a wild and desolate land. Tall trees that he had never seen before filled his line of sight. Each one was shockingly thick, so thick that it would take dozens of people to wrap their arms around it. The tree trunks were covered with purple vines. Although the leaves were lush, they couldn't hide them. The vines grew spikes that shined with a metallic luster beneath the sunlight. Unlike the purple vine that was huge, flourishing, and slightly sinister, the flower it bloomed with was a type of flower that was as small as a fingernail. There was an incomparably sweet fragrance wafting in the air, and it made one feel at ease with just a single breath, as if they were about to lose themselves in the fragrance. Qin Yu's heart chilled. He quickly held his breath and revolved his strength, completely blocking off his connection to the outside world. But even so, he still felt dizzy and his vision went black. Hum. The sound of flapping wings suddenly rang out. It was so dense that it pierced through one's eardrums, causing one's hair to stand on end and the hair on one's back to stand. Raising his head, Zhang Xian saw a wasp flying out from each of the finger-sized purple flowers. Their mouths were wide open as they charged toward the crowd. The man called Ocean Explorer had the worst luck. When the teleportation ended, he appeared closest to the purple vine. He was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. The dark swarm of bees was the first to engulf him. Bang, bang, bang. A series of collisions rang out in the air, rising and falling in succession. It was as if they had suffered a heavy blow, and bees were sent flying one after another. Although he was completely unharmed, Tanhai couldn't help but frown, his eyes revealing shock and solemnity. The defense of these seemingly unremarkable wasps was actually so strong. Even though they were sent flying, they only felt dizzy for a few moments before flapping their wings and rushing over again. As expected of the legendary Lost Garden, it was truly astonishing. But these little things didn't have the qualifications to injure him. With a cold snort, Ocean Explorer lifted a hand and grasped forwards. With a loud rumble, an invisible millstone descended, wildly spinning. Countless wasps were sucked in and instantly crushed into powder. At the same time, Qin Yu and the other three were also surrounded by the wasps. Now, the most relaxed one was the mountain pangolin. It hugged its head and curled up together. A black light flashed on the surface of its body, and it actually completed a transformation that was close to metal. No matter how the wasps surrounded it and wreaked havoc, they couldn't hurt it in the slightest. They had just arrived and hadn't even opened their eyes, yet they had already encountered danger. Don't underestimate the current situation. Although the buzzing wasps that surrounded them seemed to have been slaughtered, the ones who did this were no ordinary people. Even though Qin Yu, who had impersonated someone else, looked the weakest on the surface, his performance was far stronger than an ordinary cultivator's. In this situation, one had to be at least at the original divinity realm in order to resist the attacks of the wasps. If they rushed in, they would be torn to pieces in the blink of an eye. And from what they could see, this was only an appetizer for the Lost Garden. The wasps that flew out from the purple flowers not only had strong defenses, but their vitality was also astonishingly strong. Only by completely crushing them could they be truly killed. Otherwise, even if their heads were chopped off or their bodies were split in half, they would still be alive and kicking, full of killing power. Wisps of purple energy filled the air. These were the corpses of the wasps that evaporated under the scorching sun. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with them. At the very least, they hadn't caused any substantial harm to the group yet. But Qin Yu couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows. This was because as time passed, even though they had killed a massive number of wasps, their numbers didn't decrease at all. Rather, they seemed to be increasing in number. Looking at the purple energy in the air, Qin Yu's intuition told him that the more wasps there were, the more they were attracted to it. Before he was surrounded by a massive number of wasps, Qin Yu could see thick and dense forest trees, as well as purple vines climbing up each tree. If there were wasps hidden in the flowers of these purple vines, then they had really poked a giant beehive. He had to break out of this encirclement as soon as possible. Otherwise, if things continued like this, he would be exhausted to death before he could kill all these wasps. Was he still going to act? If he was by himself, Qin Yu was confident he could break out of here. But doing so would definitely arouse suspicions. After all, the strength needed to break out was not something he could possess with his current status. No matter what, if they were suspicious, then they would be suspicious. As long as they couldn't confirm his identity, then it wasn't a big deal. He had borrowed the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands to quietly enter the Lost Garden. Now, he had achieved his goal. As Qin Yu moved his feet and prepared to leave, the incomparably dense sounds of flapping wings suddenly weakened in his ears. It was sudden, without any warning. Qin Yu was stunned for a moment before the dense swarm of wasps faded away. Then, in several breaths of time, all the wasps retreated, drilling back into the purple flowers and vanishing from sight. Everyone gasped for breath, their eyebrows furrowed together. If it weren't for the thick pile of wasp corpses on the ground, they would have suspected that what they saw just now was an illusion. Pa! 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 A light sound entered his ears, and Qin Yu's complexion changed. He saw that on the purple vines, the flowers that had been blooming just a moment ago had suddenly folded back into buds and then retracted back into the dense leaves. Walala, there was the sound of swaying and rubbing. The purple vines on the great tree began to tighten, entangling themselves more tightly. The explorer shouted, "Be careful!" Longfeng subconsciously shrank his head and hid behind Yanping. His eyes twitched, but he still protected Yanping. Unless he didn't want to stay in the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands anymore, he couldn't allow anything to happen to Long Phone. There was silence. The people who were waiting in formation did not see anything. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound. This was the sound of the lush leaves of the great tree and the purple vines gently rubbing against each other. The wind was rising. It wasn't strong. Beneath the blazing hot sunlight, it actually brought with it a comfortable coolness. But at this time, Qin Yu's pupils shrank. He looked up into the distant horizon. There was an abnormal darkness there, one that was filled with a repressive and cruel atmosphere. Without hesitation, he took a step forward and his figure exploded outwards. Unfortunately, although Qin Yu's reaction was fast and his speed was fast, the darkness in the distant horizon was even faster. Rumble, rumble. There was a deep roar and the world seemed to tremble. A clear suction force covered Qin Yu. Inevitably, he began to slow down and helplessness appeared in his eyes. He had many cards in his hands, but when it came to running away, he seemed to be lacking. As Qin Yu was hesitating about whether or not he should use his cards and try to escape, he saw a trace of darkness in front of him and decisively dispelled this thought. This wasn't a pursuit from behind, but a four-sided encirclement. He had already become a fish in a net, so there was no need to waste any more effort. He had to save some energy and face the torment that awaited him. Shua! Qin Yu's figure stopped. In the next moment, he was like a common-looking pebble that was instantly swallowed up by the darkness. A heaven-shaking explosion rumbled in his ears. Qin Yu's mind roared and his chest tightened, as if he couldn't breathe. A formidable, tearing strength wrapped around his entire body. It was like thousands of hands were grasping outwards and tearing him apart. Peepa! Peepa! His skin cracked apart and countless wounds appeared, revealing dark red flesh and blood. The bones hidden deep within began to emit pained groans. Huh! With a loud shout, Qin Yu's heart raced, pushing the power of his blood vitality to rapidly revolve. The wounds on his body instantly healed. At the same time, the power of space erupted, wrapping around him. The Lost Garden was indeed a place that was nearly isolated from the outside world, a place that had been forgotten by time. Even the rules here were different. No, to say that the rules were different was a bit inappropriate. To be more precise, in the Lost Garden, controlling the rules here required a greater amount of strength. With Qin Yu's understanding of the Tao of space, he was only able to barely distort space. He was unable to completely resist the power of the storm outside. Fortunately, the remaining portion couldn't cause any substantial damage to Qin Yu. Well, it didn't seem too dangerous. As this thought flashed through his mind, Qin Yu's complexion changed. His figure flickered to the side, crossing paths with a black shadow. The two of them were extremely close, nearly touching each other's noses, only missing each other by a hair's breadth. So close that Qin Yu could clearly smell the incomparably thick and nauseating smell of blood coming from the other party's body. Qin Yu's ears caught a faint sound. The black shadow that he had just avoided leapt forwards once more. This time, Qin Yu was finally able to clearly see the other party's appearance. It was a strange beast with wings on its back that resembled a praying mantis. However, its size was astonishing. It was larger than a normal adult. Its compound eyes flashed with a blood-red light, and its pitch-black forelimbs were raised like sabers. Chapter 12:52. So there was something even more terrifying hidden within the black storm. No wonder the wasps had fled so quickly, abandoning the prey that was right in front of them. This was the first thought that popped up in Qin Yu's mind when he saw the mantis-like beast. To be more precise, it was a clear intuition. This two-saber-wielding beast in front of him was extremely difficult to deal with. Reality proved that Qin Yu's vision was correct. With a light ripping sound, a clean cut appeared on his black robes. Blood seeped out, accompanied by a faint numbing feeling. Poison. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. Even with the toughness of his body, he found it hard to resist. This poison was tyrannical and fierce. It could be imagined. Luckily, He hadn't been afraid of poison for many years. With a thought, the numbing feeling gradually began to dissipate. But on the surface, Qin Yu's complexion became increasingly ugly. His eyebrows furrowed, and his eyes revealed a trace of panic. Across from him, the mantis-like beast's eyes surged with a blood-red light. The ominous light in its eyes became even brighter. This thing really did have a spiritual intelligence. In other words, Qin Yu's performance just now wasn't for the blind to see. With a spiritual intelligence and fierce strength, it was certainly more difficult to deal with. But on the other hand, sometimes the smarter one was the faster one died. Because it was confident in itself, it didn't realize that the prey it had chosen had already decided to kill it from the start and had already begun to do so. The black storm was like its home. It didn't affect the cockroach-like beast at all. It flapped the wings on its back, coming and going like the wind, cruel and ruthless. A pair of pitch-black forelimbs seemed to fuse into the black storm, increasing its speed. It came and went without a trace, so fast that it left one's heart racing. Qin Yu tried his best to dodge, but more and more wounds appeared on his body. His face was gradually covered with a dark haze, and he gasped for breath. The blood that stained his robes gradually turned black, emitting a sour smell. The mantis-like beast revealed a dignified look in its blood-red eyes. This common-looking human in front of it actually had such strength. But in the black storm, even if he had the strength to fight a dragon, he couldn't display it at all. He could only be slowly ground to death. It was about time. The poison had invaded his marrow and blood vessels, and this person had reached his limit. It was time to give him a fatal strike and end the hunt. The two sharp forelimbs rubbed against each other, producing sparks. This was a subconscious action of the mantis race when they were excited. It already had a premonition that this prey must be very delicious. Eating him might even help it break through its limits and increase its strength to a higher level. At this moment, Qin Yu muttered to himself. He was almost done with his acting. If this mantis beast still didn't act, he would really be poisoned. After all, compared to being poisoned, detoxification was always slower. The more wounds there were, the more toxins would accumulate in the body, and after a long time, it would definitely affect the body. The sudden vibrations of the wings were like a taut bowstring that was suddenly released. The sound made by the small, high-speed vibrations could be heard. The mantis beast pounced over. Its speed was faster than before, and its blade was also faster. Qin Yu thought to himself, what a coincidence. So you were also hiding your strength. As an ancient beast, how could you be so sinister? But unfortunately, when it came to the word sinister, the dignified human race was not afraid of anyone. With a thought, he gathered the power of space into a single point and erupted with all his strength. After losing his protection, the rotting wounds on Qin Yu's body began to split open. Flesh flew out and blood wildly gushed out. His complexion instantly paled. But after paying this price, the mantis beast was like an arrow released from a bow. The rapidly approaching mantis beast suddenly paused for a moment. It seemed to feel an intense crisis. With a sharp cry, its wings flapped and its speed rose once more. Peepa, peepa, small cracking sounds spread out from its body. This was the sound of the space imprisonment rapidly collapsing. After acting for a long time, Qin Yu had finally found a chance. He certainly wouldn't give it another chance to escape. But sometimes, no matter how good a plan was, it couldn't keep up with changes. Qin Yu lifted his hand, and a silver moon appeared behind him. Just as he was about to cut down, a figure rushed out from the black storm, crashing into him. Qin Yu's sword almost cut down. At the last moment, he forcefully pulled it back. He stuffily coughed again and again. The first sound was when the silver moon sword intent was forcefully interrupted. The second sound was when he was struck. Didn't this woman look where she was going? She knew she was going to crash into him, and yet she didn't slow down. Qin Yu was infuriated. He lowered his head to meet Song Zhu's eyes. Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with panic. She had lost all of her previous momentum and was now like a timid cat. Bang! The space imprisonment was broken. Qin Yu looked up at the two mantis beasts in front of him. He couldn't help but sigh. This was troublesome. It was already difficult to kill one, much less two. Moreover, he had already suffered a loss, so it would be even more difficult to scheme against them. The thought of turning around and running away appeared in his mind, but he immediately pressed it down. He really couldn't run away. Within the black storm, the mantis beasts were as relaxed as eating and drinking. Even if he vomited blood, he still couldn't outrun them. If he couldn't run, then he could only go all out. Looking at the two mantis beasts, the blood-red light and the ominous light in their eyes, Chinyu felt that the chances of them resolving this enmity with a smile were far too small. "Is there any way to deal with the trouble you brought?" Chinyu asked with a frown. Sangju shook her head in panic. If she had a way, why would she be chased around in such a panic? Chinyu coldly sneered. "Then I'm sorry. I can only run by myself. I hope that these two will be busy eating meat and won't chase me." Sangju's face paled. In her opinion, Chinyu was an extremely cunning and deeply hidden character. There was no doubt that he would do something like this. She subconsciously hugged Chinyu tightly and shook her head, tears flowing down her cheeks. Her previous judgment seemed to have been a bit off. Although it wasn't particularly large, it was still a bit large. Bah, what time was it, and she still had the mind to think about such things? What kind of bug had taken over her brain? Chinyu gathered his thoughts and sighed inwardly. She had been scared to tears. It was clear that there really was no other way. In truth, this was different from what he had expected. He had clearly thought that she and Tanhai wouldn't be easy to deal with. Indeed, men were bitter. In a critical moment, they had to rely on themselves to go all out. Although the taste of a warm and fragrant jade was quite good, Chinyu wasn't in the mood to enjoy such things right now. He reached out and grabbed Sangju. Beneath her wide and panic-stricken eyes, Chinyu threw her far away. He muttered, "Stupid woman, if you don't hurry up and run, are you waiting to die?" As he spoke, he rushed forwards. Since he couldn't scheme against them, he could only brace himself and attack first. At least he would be able to take the initiative. Hum, hum. There was the sound of flapping wings. Two mantis beasts rushed forwards. As he thought, these two bastards' first target was her. Chinyu had already guessed this, but he had just verified it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrown Sangju away just now. As for having tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex, he really didn't think too much about it. If she could cook up a decent meal and buy him some time, he would definitely turn tail and run. Bang! A heaven-shaking explosion erupted from the black storm. The black storm erupted, forming a shockwave that sent Zhangzhu, who had yet to stabilize himself, flying again. After tumbling around for some time, the pale Zhangzhu bit down on her lips. She looked at the area where the terrifying shockwaves had erupted from. That person was fighting two mantis beasts alone. He was indeed strong, stronger than she had imagined. But the environment of the black storm was too poor. Could he survive? Sangju didn't know. She felt that she had misjudged this person. He wasn't as cunning or annoying as he seemed. Taking a deep breath, Sangju turned and left. She had to find Tanhai as soon as possible. Most of her strength had been sealed away, and she didn't have the strength to protect herself. Of course, there was also a hidden thought in her heart. After she found Tanhai, she might be able to save Chinyu's life. Whoosh! Sangju vanished in the black storm. Within the Lost Garden, the black storm wreaked havoc wherever it went. After sweeping away countless prey, it finally went far away. The earth cracked, the mountain peaks shattered, the rivers dried up. Heaven-reaching trees were forcefully pulled out from the earth. Most of their roots were exposed, and countless branches were broken. Some of the more unlucky ones only had giant pits left where they stood. And now, Chinyu was lying in one of these incomparably large pits. His face was pale, and he bitterly smiled. Although he knew that the Lost Garden was dangerous, he never imagined that before he entered, he would be struck by a hammer before he could even find his footing. That woman Sangju was a jinx. If it weren't for her, Chinyu would have already killed her and run away. He wouldn't have fallen to his current fate, lying in a pit of mud, gasping for breath. Moreover, although I pushed you away, you shouldn't have turned around and disappeared without a trace. Ha, woman! Chinyu held his breath. He thought that it was best if he didn't see her again. Otherwise, he wanted to ask her, how would he repay her for saving his life? She was too young. He wasn't interested in her at all. He angrily thought in his heart. His thoughts were all over the place, but they were able to alleviate the restlessness in his heart and pass the time. Chin had already been lying there for almost 2 hours. His injuries were extremely heavy. In simpler terms, he was like a clay figurine that had been randomly glued together after being smashed to pieces. Moreover, he hadn't put much effort into sticking them together. As long as he shook them a little, they would shatter and scatter to the ground. Of course, if it were just 2 mantis beasts, they would have been tricky to deal with, but they wouldn't have ended up in such a miserable state. But they had actually been so shameless. 2 against 1 wasn't enough, and they had even called for help. Luckily, Chin Yu's resistance to beatings was high enough that he was just barely able to preserve his life. The Black Storm had just passed. After the Lost Garden was ravaged and smashed, there was a rare period of peace. This gave Chin Yu a chance to catch his breath. A moment later, he let out a long breath. His body had finally recovered the ability to move. Blinking his eyes, Chin Yu tried to stand up. He placed his palms on the ground and slowly exerted strength. Gotcha! His first thought was, fuck, this is bad. His arm is broken. Then he discovered that it wasn't his arm that was broken, but where his hand was pressing down. It was like a dead branch had been crushed. What was that smell? Chin Yu let out a sigh of relief. He looked down at the place his palm was pressing down on. Faint traces of translucent green liquid began to gush out. Chin Yu was stunned. What was this? Was this a carrot after a slap? Do I look like such a spineless person? If you give it to me, then I'll... Yes, that's right. I'm that sort of person. Why am I still pretending in this situation? If I don't hurry up and go, and then I'll die. Chapter 1253. The Source of Life. As Chin Yu smelled the scent and saw the light green liquid seeping out, he immediately determined what it was. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was overjoyed. Otherwise, with his current condition, even if he regained his ability to move, his chances of surviving in the Lost Garden wouldn't be high. The scent spread through the air. One didn't need to be a genius to know that it would soon attract nearby life forms. Whether it was cultivators or natives of the Lost Garden, this wasn't a result that Chin Yu wanted to see. Don't just stand there. Use your hands and feet, open the hole, and hurry in. The source of life in the Lost Garden had an automatic sealing ability. As long as a life form entered, it would automatically seal itself. To Chin Yu, this was a lifesaver. Gotcha! This time, the bone really broke. There was nothing he could do about it. It had just barely grown back and hadn't grown solid yet. Gotcha! It broke again. Chin Yu frowned, but his movements didn't stop. With a gotcha, a hole appeared in front of him. What entered his eyes was a sparkling green liquid. According to the records in the Jade Slip, the grade of this source of life wasn't too good. But at this time, there was no point in being picky. It was good enough that it was useful. Chin Yu flipped over, and with a thud, he drilled in. The light green liquid instantly erupted with light, as if it had been activated. The surface rapidly froze, forming a layer of ice. The scent in the air rapidly dissipated. In the next moment, just as this layer of ice formed, the earth began to rumble. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Chin Yu. It was a horned monkey holding a stone staff. Staring at the layer of ice, it emitted an enraged roar. It lifted the stone staff and smashed down with the force of 10,000 caddies. With a heaven-shaking explosion, the stone staff flew out of the monkey's hand, and its entire palm was torn apart by the shaking force. Blood dripped down, but the layer of ice didn't even move. There wasn't even a white mark on it. With a pained roar, the monkey gasped for breath. Then, it turned its head to retrieve its stone staff and sat down outside the pit. It wanted to wait here for the fellow inside to come out. Then it would smash its head open and swallow it into its stomach. After entering the source of life, Chin Yu certainly didn't know that outside there was a large monkey holding a stone staff that wanted to smash his head open, waiting for him to come out. Now he felt really good. Although he had already gained a rough understanding of the source of life through the records in the Jade Slip, it was only after entering it that he realized that there was a limit to what words could describe. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't replicate what he truly felt. Being in the source of life, Zhang Xian's breathing wasn't restricted at all, and with every breath he took, a warm and gentle energy continuously flowed into his body through his pores. His severely injured body was recovering at an astonishing speed. He could almost hear the sound of broken bones and flesh rapidly growing back. At the same time, his soul felt like it was soaking in a hot spring. His lazy thoughts didn't want to move, but he could clearly feel that his fatigue was rapidly disappearing and his strength was rising. As expected, the source of life was truly a perfect tonic soup. Now, Qin Yu felt that this analogy was far too vivid and accurate, and this was only a source of life that wasn't of a very high quality. If he could find a dark green source of life, or even the legendary purple source of life, what would it feel like? He wouldn't explode from the energy that had entered his body, would he? TSK, but thinking about it, as a cultivator, if he could be stuffed to death by the power fused into his body, he would probably die. He would probably be very happy. He had just come back to life, so he shouldn't think about dying here and there. At the very least, Qin Yu had obtained a blessing in disguise. Was Hidden Pearl a jinx? Qin Yu hesitated. If it weren't for her, he definitely wouldn't have found this source of life. Whatever, he would just consider this as interest from her for saving his life. That jinx was still a jinx, and a relatively small one at that. In his lazy state, Qin Yu's thoughts were all over the place, all sorts of unreliable thoughts running through his mind. The old turtle's voice suddenly sounded out. Master, although I think that a man who is covered in scars and survives after experiencing danger does indeed have the qualifications to enjoy a period of peace and tranquility. But such a good cultivation opportunity, if we use it for random thoughts, it would be a bit of a waste. A waste? Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. Should he pretend that he didn't hear it? After all, the first half of the old turtle's words were quite reasonable. The source of life's ability to disintegrate a person's will was indeed strong. He had to resist it. He couldn't fall like this. Clenching his teeth, Qin Yu slowly and clearly said, "What cultivation opportunity? Speak." The old turtle coughed. Master, there are other secrets hidden on your body. Where did the divine seal come from? Go and find it. I don't think there will be a time when it comes to perceiving the rules of the world faster than right now. Moreover, I can help you. I've been eating so much recently that I'm a bit full and need time to digest. His last words revealed a trace of sorrow and sorrow. First, he never thought that there would be a time when he would forcefully eat too much and nearly explode. Second, as someone who stood at the peak of the death-fearing world, he actually had to actively consume the strength to maintain his life. This was simply too hard to accept. Qin Yu struggled to resist his own laziness. How could he be in the mood to ponder over the old turtle's current mood fluctuations? He was only slightly surprised for a moment before he discovered the existence of the stone pagoda. But in this state, he was too lazy to think about it. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred, and he began to call out to the stone pagoda's consciousness. Once, there was no response. Twice, there was no response. 3 times, there was no response. Qin Yu's first thought was, did this fellow explode? You're the one who exploded. The stone pagoda's voice was filled with anger. As the one who helped you condense the galaxy divine seal, you ignored me first and then slandered me for no reason. How could I not throw a little tantrum? It's impossible for me to agree just because you called me. Now, you should be able to sense that I am angry from my tone and reaction. Very good. Then prepare to think of a way to comfort me and obtain my forgiveness. Humph, I'll tell you the truth. This pagoda has a great temper, and it's hard to coax him. Are you ready to cry your heart out? Qin Yu wasn't ready, and he didn't think he had done anything wrong. In his lazy state, his mind was a bit slow. It took him a moment to regain his composure. His first reaction was that this fellow was too bold. Didn't he remember who it was that had been scared and coaxed by him in the past? Moreover, just look at this old turtle. His status and background were greater than the heavens, yet he still behaved himself. In comparison, the stone pagoda was far too excessive. Qin Yu quietly said, "I think you really want to explode." In the darkness, a certain pagoda that had suffered alone for countless years nearly cried. It thought to itself, "Oh heavens and earth, just what did I do wrong to have such a master that makes me feel such sorrow and despair?" Qin Yu didn't give it more time to cry out in sorrow. He sighed at the unfairness of fate. "Tell me, how should I cultivate now? Otherwise, you can shut your mouth forever." The stone pagoda was terrified. There was nothing he could do about it. Right now, Qin Yu was the master and it was the subordinate. And most importantly, this contract was signed by it on its own initiative. There was no way it could resist. If it really angered Qin Yu, a single thought from him could cause the stone pagoda to explode, but it would be easy to freeze it. It had finally seen the light of day with great difficulty and even had a chance to recover. How could it be willing to go back to those dark days? It was too difficult for me. The stone pagoda didn't know that the old turtle had similar thoughts not too long ago. Otherwise, it would have considered him a friend. "Master, I can already clearly sense your current condition. The effects of entering the trial field of the rules are indeed excellent. Cough, cough, but maintaining the operation of the trial field requires a great deal of strength. I haven't recovered yet, so I need Master to provide me with some." Qin Yu said, "Speak simply and get to the point." The stone pagoda vowed that one day in the future, if it became a master, it would definitely let Qin Yu know what it meant to be alive. He had already said the key points, so what else did it want to hear? "Master, I will take a portion of the strength that you have absorbed so that I can open the trial field of the rules." Qin Yu didn't even need to think about it. No, he didn't even have enough of the perfect supplement soup for himself, so he certainly wasn't willing to take it out. The stone pagoda cried. This was the typical behavior of a bully who wanted a cow to work, but also wanted the cow to not eat grass. Even if the stone pagoda died, it wouldn't be able to maintain the opening of the trial field in its current condition. Luckily, this deadlock didn't continue for too long before it was broken by the old turtle. It indicated that it could resolve this matter. The old turtle's solution was very simple. Where was his place? This was the ancient lost garden that was maintained in its original state. Everything else was lacking, but it didn't lack that bit of energy between the heavens and earth. And all he needed to do was connect a string and pull a pipe to borrow a bit of it. Of course, saying it 10,000 times wasn't as good as doing it well. The old turtle had succeeded. It was true that maintaining the trial field of the rules consumed a great deal of energy, but within the scope of the entire Lost Garden, it was only a drop in the ocean, almost negligible. His field of vision darkened. When he regained consciousness, Qin Yu discovered that he had returned to the God-forbidding gorge. Everything was the same as before, except that there was no one else here besides him. Xiang Shui. Things had been a bit messy. He had left her at the Eastern Zhou family, and as soon as he left, there had been no news of her. But thinking about it, with Eastern Zhou jelly here, she shouldn't have suffered any grievances. And now, Qin Yu's name had spread throughout the world. With the strength of the Eastern Zhou family, it wouldn't be difficult to determine his identity, and it was even more impossible for her to be wronged. But even so, once the matters of the Lost Garden were over, he would have to make a trip there and see whether or not she was willing to live in the Peach Garden. As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, the stone pagoda's voice sounded out. "Master, if you need it, women are also possible. You just need to expend a bit more energy, and you can create an exact replica. A true replica. No matter what you do, it won't be a problem." Its tone was filled with confidence. Qin Yu immediately froze. His face darkened as he clenched his teeth. Could it be that this was the impression he had in the stone pagoda's heart? And you say it won't be a problem? What do you want me to do? If it weren't for the fact that I needed you to continue running around and maintaining the trial field of the rules, I would have immediately taught you what the consequences of speaking such a big mouth are. You can sense my thoughts? The stone pagoda cautiously said, "Just a little, not even a little." "Yes." Chapter 1254. Yu finally knew why the old turtle had said that this was an excellent opportunity to cultivate. To be able to obtain a massive amount of free strength to maintain the operation of the trial field of rules was certainly a part of the reason. But more importantly, Yu discovered that because of the existence of his source of life, the speed at which he perceived the rules was terrifyingly fast. This was confirmed after he asked the old turtle for confirmation. The source of life was a lucky chance born from the world of the Lost Garden. By staying here, one could obtain a bit of the blessing of the Lost Garden's will. Or, to be more precise, it was the will left behind by a powerful ancient life form that had created this place in the distant past. According to the old turtle, this was an obsession. As long as one could obtain the approval of the Lost Garden, they would be able to obtain a blessing in their cultivation. Perceiving the rules of the world to accelerate was only one of them. It just so happened to be the most suitable for Yu. He had already stepped onto the road of true divinity, and there was no way he could turn back. So what was there to hesitate about? He would cultivate. Besides being separated from Sea Explorer at the start, Songju's luck had been quite good. It didn't take long for her to find him. But at the time, Sea Explorer's situation wasn't too good. Afterwards, for some unknown reason, the mantis beasts chasing them retreated on their own initiative. Looking at Sea Explorer's tired face that he was trying his best to squeeze out a smile, Songju couldn't bring herself to say the words she wanted to say. Afterwards, the black storm swept through. She pulled Sea Explorer back to look for him, but in the end, they didn't find anything. Sea Explorer asked her what she was looking for. Songju shook her head, not saying anything. If that fellow didn't die, she would repay him when they met again in the future. But if he died, there was no difference between saying anything and not saying anything. Songju, we should go. Sea Explorer closed the jade plate in his hands and said in a soft voice. He looked at her and frowned, a bit of worry in his eyes. Even after the great changes in the past, she wasn't like this. Sea Explorer really wanted to know just what had happened in the Black Storm while they were separated. But this cousin of Songju's, although she didn't seem like much on the surface, the truth was that she was someone with her own ideas. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been forced to accompany her on this crazy adventure. She didn't want to say anything more. It was useless to ask. Songju's eyelashes trembled. She pressed them down slightly and opened them again. She took one last look behind her and stood up. Let's go. The two of them headed toward a certain place in the Lost Garden. If one were to lock onto them from high altitude, they would discover that although there were some twists and turns along the way, when scaled down, they were basically traveling in a straight line. It was as if they knew exactly where they should go next. Eldest senior brother stood in front of the carcass of a giant beast and stretched out his hand to gently touch it. The surface of its body was crystal clear, as if it was carved out of crystal, and the patterns of its scales were revealed in his eyes. There was a hint of admiration and pity in his eyes. To be able to traverse the river of time and encounter this ancient creature that only existed in the records of history. How fortunate was he? Unfortunately, the situation today was different, and the creatures in the Lost Garden could not be brought out, so they could only be killed. After thinking for a while, eldest senior brother took out a small knife and started to peel off the armor. The knife looked very ordinary, but it was very dexterous in eldest senior brother's hands. It sank into the gap between the scales, and with a gentle turn and flick, a complete scale flew out and was caught by his other hand. Lei Xiaoyu walked over, a smile on her face. What is eldest senior brother doing? Without turning his head, eldest senior brother said, Junior brother has cultivated the true divinity path and comprehended the rules of the world is his foundation. These scale patterns are the manifestation of the rules. If we bring them back, they might help him cultivate. Lei Xiaoyu's eyes flashed. She didn't say anything. She simply turned and looked at a giant green crystal on the ground. It was a deep color, almost green to the extreme, like a dazzling piece of jade. Eldest senior brother, the azure dragon has yet to mature. Isn't this source of life a bit too much? If it can't eat it, it might be in danger. Eldest senior brother stopped and turned around. He smiled. I understand junior apprentice sister's meaning, But Honorable Master said that the Azure Dragon's talent is extraordinary. The Lost Garden may be a lucky chance for us, but for it, it might be a heaven-defying stroke of good fortune. So, we must temporarily endure it. Junior Apprentice Sister, do you understand? Lei Xiaoyu nodded. Understand. Since this is Honorable Master's meaning, just pretend I didn't say anything. Eldest Senior Brother, continue. I'm too lazy to move, so I won't help you peel it. She turned and walked away. Eldest Senior Brother revealed a helpless expression. Junior Apprentice Sister was indeed dissatisfied. But he already understood her temperament, so he wasn't angry. It was just that the words peel it weren't too pleasant to hear. The warmth that he used to care for his junior apprentice brother's cultivation had been completely destroyed. With a smile, eldest senior brother turned and continued. If she wanted to say something, then say it. Have you found them yet? Trash. Think of a way to find them as soon as possible. We cannot allow that woman to undo the seal in her body. If you can't do this well, then prepare yourself to stay here forever. Whoosh, whoosh, with the sound of breaking air, over a dozen figures howled into the distance. The black-robed man frowned. His hands were held behind his back, and from within his sleeves, tiny sounds emitted out. It was like the sound of bones cracking, but also like iron and stone colliding. Hidden Pearl, you cannot escape. This is your fate. It was decided from the day you were born. The large monkey had an impatient personality. Although it had been waiting for 100 claws to scratch its heart, it still forced itself to wait here. It was just one step away, just one step away. The source of life was its. Moreover, it was something that belonged to it to begin with. Many years ago, the large monkey had discovered the secret hidden in the roots of the great tree. But at that time, the source of life had just formed and its usefulness was limited. The large monkey hesitated again and again. In the end, it decided to wait. Like this, it waited for many years. There were several times when it almost couldn't bear it any longer. It wanted the source of life to absorb more strength so that its quality could become higher. Finally, not too long ago, the large monkey deliberately stirred up a dispute and forced several of its enemies to flee, preparing to enjoy the sumptuous meal it had been waiting for. But just as the battle ended and before it could return, the black storm arrived. The large monkey desperately tried to prevent itself from being swept away. With great difficulty, the large monkey waited until the black storm passed through. It didn't dare to delay for even a minute, but in the end, a problem occurred. When it smelled the scent of the source of life in the air, it nearly went insane. Thus, even though it knew that the seal on life couldn't be broken, it still couldn't help but attack in a fit of rage. Because of this, one of its furry claws was shaken until it was dripping with blood. Wait, no matter how long it took, it had to catch this bastard and eat him up from head to toe. My source of life is mine. If you take it away, then I'll eat you. Of course, the reason the large monkey dared to make this decision was because it hadn't felt the slightest aura of a powerful life. The living environment of ancient life forms was far more dangerous than it was today. To be able to live for so many years and become the overlord of the surrounding area, the large monkey's keen senses could be said to have played a great role in protecting this source of life. At least it had this much confidence. Kacha! A light sound entered its ears. The large monkey's ears perked up, and it stood up. It lifted the stick in its hand, but during this entire process, it didn't make the slightest sound. Its icy, cold, and cruel eyes were filled with excitement. It thought, "You're out. You've finally come out. This monkey brother's stick is hungry and thirsty." More cracks appeared on the layer of ice in front of it. Then, with more light sounds, the cracks spread outwards like a spider web. Bang! It shattered in all directions. The large monkey roared out loud. It stood still in midair and smashed its stick down like a bolt of lightning. It was truly cruel and ruthless, its momentum shocking the heavens and causing a series of explosions to ring out in the air. But the moment the stone stick fell into the deep pit, it was like someone had pressed a pause button. The large monkey froze where it was. The stone stick had completed a transition between extreme movement and extreme stillness. Perhaps my aura really isn't compatible with the Lost Garden. Otherwise, why is it that every time it doesn't even give me time to catch my breath and instead attacks me head-on? With a sigh, Chinyu walked out. He glanced at the frozen large monkey, and a bit of helplessness appeared on his face. But there was joy in his eyes. This was truly worthy of being called the true divinity path. As long as there were enough rules, they would even dare to fight the heavens and earth. The speed at which their strength rose was simply like they had opened a cheat. To be more precise, to be extravagant enough to use the trial field of the rules to cultivate. It was no different from cheating. Humph humph. Cheating was cheating. The only thing that mattered was increasing one's strength. Everything else was useless. Moreover, this sort of cheating method wasn't something that just anyone could use. If you coveted it, go ahead and try. That's right, that's how it was. Feeling carefree and comfortable, Chinyu snapped his fingers, and a large monkey that had been frozen in space instantly disintegrated. The smell of blood assailed the senses. At this time, Chinyu's eyes flashed. With a thought, a swarm of ants appeared in front of him. These were the purple-back blue-wing ants that had retreated behind the scenes for a long time. To say that they were easy to beat up was because Chinyu's strength had risen far too quickly. If the opponent was too strong, the ants would simply come to their deaths. For instance, just by appearing in the Lost Garden, these once incomparably ferocious purple-back blue-wing ants that had killed countless enemies were flapping their wings in chaos and on the verge of collapse. It had to be known that this place was nearly completely preserved from ancient times. Countless formidable life forms lived here, and a wild aura that was naturally released covered every inch of the land. It wasn't something that they could withstand. Chinyu flicked his sleeves and space twisted, isolating the wild aura outside. Only then did the purple-back blue-wing ants barely manage to stabilize themselves. Without needing to be urged, the ant swarm turned and threw themselves onto the ground, covering the broken corpse of the large monkey. There was a scalp-numbing sound of chewing. Their speed was extremely fast. When the ant swarm flew up once more, there was only a pale white skeleton left on the ground, without even the tiniest bit of blood. As for the purple-back blue-wing ants, their bellies were round and swaying as they flew. It was clear that they had eaten too much. Luckily, their auras were stable. You carefully sensed that there was nothing wrong with them, so he put them away. It had to be said that these purple-back blue-wing ants had followed You ever since he was weak, so they certainly had feelings for him. If he could help them rapidly increase their strength in the Lost Garden, that would be for the best. But as for the specifics, that would depend on their digestion speed. If a large monkey could eat too much, then there was no point in thinking about anything else. Chinyu swept his eyes around. Then, his feet fell, and he rapidly flew away. While he was absorbing the source of life and cultivating in the trial field of rules, the old turtle wasn't idling around. So now, Chinyu had a goal. Chapter 1255. When he was separated in the Black Storm, Chinyu never thought he would be able to meet Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak again. But fate was mysterious. In a vast Lost Garden, they were reunited once more. The moment their eyes met, Chinyu was surprised. But looking at their expressions, it was clear that Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak didn't think he would be able to survive the Black Storm. But soon, the two of them adjusted their expressions. Cliff Ping coughed. The first to speak was Dragon Peak. Junior apprentice Brother Chin. Did you see Explorer and Hidden Pearl? With just a few words, Chinyu knew that this person was still thinking about that small and beautiful Jinx. Disregarding everything else, just this eyesight alone would cause him to die sooner or later. At this moment, Chinyu hesitated. He already had a goal, so he shouldn't waste any more time. Or should he just kill the two of them? In any case, the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands and Peach Garden were enemies, so he didn't feel any psychological burden doing so. There were certainly advantages. Once these two people died, besides Sea Explorer and Hidden Pearl, no one else would know of Chinyu's existence. It would be safer and more hidden. As his thoughts raced, he subconsciously responded, I didn't see them. As he spoke, His expression changed from surprise to joy, almost seamlessly. Qin Yu was stunned. He hadn't thought of doing this at all, but he had subconsciously done it. As he thought, acting was addictive. No, my goal is to find more sources of life, not to become a successful actor. Since he had already strayed off the path, he had to decisively turn it back. He would start by killing these two fellows in front of him and use their blood as a sacrifice to the flag. Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak had disappointed expressions. They never thought that Qin Yu would already consider which of them he would kill first. After obtaining a negative response, Dragon Peak's interest in Qin Yu plummeted. His face drooped as if he didn't want to answer. He turned his head and said, "That person from Peach Garden should be arriving soon. Senior apprentice brother, let's hurry over." Qin Yu's hands paused in his sleeves, a puzzled look on his face. Cliff Ping coughed. "Junior apprentice brother Qin, you came at the right time. There is something I need your help with." He suddenly thought of an even better idea. Not only could he kill them without leaving any traces, but he might even be able to shake off the blame on himself. After all, that was the Peach Garden. Although there was no saint path in the Lost Garden, as long as something happened, it would be difficult to erase it. True saint of the Permethar realm, it's better to be more careful in the end. While speaking, Yin Ping gave Long Feng a look. Although Long Feng didn't really understand what Yin Ping meant, he was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. "It's nothing important. Let's talk as we walk." "Junior apprentice brother Qin, hurry up." Yin Ping pulled Qin Yu with a hand and smiled warmly and brightly. Then, on the road, he rambled on about a great deal of things. Although he was vague, Qin Yu was able to speculate a few things. It seemed like some of the people in the Lost Garden had discovered the traces of a certain disciple of the Peach Blossom Garden and were preparing to join hands. Like the Dragon Mountain Holy Land, they were standing on the opposite side of the Peach Garden. But this reason alone was clearly not enough. There would be plenty of opportunities to seek revenge in the future. Was there really a need to waste time in the Lost Garden? Therefore, there was a high probability that this disciple of the Peach Blossom Garden had something that they desperately wanted. That was why they joined forces. Who could it be? Eldest senior apprentice brother was the first to rule them out. It wasn't that he looked down on Yin Ping and Long Feng, but that birds of a feather flock together. If someone could join hands with them, just what sort of character could they be? To deal with eldest senior apprentice brother, that person was no different from sending himself to the kitchen. In the blink of an eye, he was cut down. Fine, he still looked down on them. In the past, third senior apprentice brother had managed the affairs of the Peach Blossom Garden, both large and small, and he had a considerable reputation in the St. Dao circle. In addition to his tyrannical bloodline, it wasn't too likely that he would have any designs on him. Of the three people, two of them had been eliminated. That left only Lei Xiaoyu. Although Qin Yu already had some inference that the Peach Blossom Garden Master was up to something, an inference was only an inference. There was no actual proof. If Lei Xiaoyu really was Lei Xiaoyu and her target today was her, then this girl would be in danger. These thoughts rapidly flashed through Qin Yu's mind. Then, he made a decision. He would spare the two of them and follow them to take a look. After all, no matter who their target was, they were all people of the Peach Blossom Garden. Since Qin Yu knew, there was no reason for him to stand idly by. There wasn't much to say as they hurried along. The only thing that surprised Qin Yu was that the one responsible for leading the way was actually Long Feng. Moreover, as luck would have it, they managed to avoid several high danger zones that the old turtle had sensed. Once or twice could be considered a coincidence, but this had already happened 5 or 6 times. If Qin Yu still believed this to be the case, he would have died long ago. Qin Yu couldn't help but quietly glance at this second-generation cultivator, who seemed mediocre and incompetent the moment they met. Was he pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, or was there some other reason? As if sensing Qin Yu's gaze, Yin Ping smiled and said, "Junior apprentice brother Long Feng's talent is extraordinary, and he was born with a keen sense. Following him is absolutely the right choice." Long Feng coughed. He held his hands behind his back and looked up at the skies at a 45-degree angle, as if he were an expert that didn't care about fame or fortune. Qin Yu immediately cast a look of envy, surprise, and admiration. It was a look that left one satisfied. His acting skills seemed to have improved again. Could it be that, deep in his bones, he was a veteran actor? As Qin Yu's thoughts were in chaos, he suddenly frowned. The old turtle had told him that there were many cultivators gathered in front of them. It seemed they should be arriving soon. After Yin Ping sent out a signal, over a dozen cultivators appeared in front of them. Before the Lost Garden opened, Qin Yu's attention had been placed on the group of fierce people around his eldest senior apprentice brother. He made a mental note of them in case he encountered them after entering and was prepared ahead of time. Yin Ping, Long Feng, who is this? A cultivator asked with a frown. The other people's faces were also a little ugly. Everyone knew what they were doing today. If they brought along a new face and news of this were spread out, would they still be able to live in the future? Yin Ping smiled and cupped his hands together. Everyone, this junior apprentice brother Qin is a descendant of my Dragon Mountain saint. He is absolutely trustworthy. After he finished speaking, he revealed an apologetic expression. He turned to Qin Yu and said, "Junior apprentice brother Qin, please go to the side and wait a moment. Let me explain things to everyone so that we don't stir up any trouble." Qin Yu had a scared expression on his face. He nodded repeatedly and walked to the side. Yin Ping flicked his sleeves and laid down a spell. Then he turned to the crowd, and a sharp light exploded in his eyes. "In the end, you are all disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden. If you can avoid doing anything, then retreat as far away as possible. After all, with the Garden Master's supernatural powers, none of us can guarantee that we won't be discovered. This person is the insurance that I've found for all of you. He was the one who did it, so the karma will be concentrated on him alone. Then, this person died in the Lost Garden. Even if the Yard Master has extraordinary abilities, I don't think you and I will be exposed." These words caused everyone's eyes to brighten. After a while, Yin Ping called Qin Yu over. The scene was warm and touching. Everyone looked at Qin Yu as if they were looking at a brother or sister. Towards this, Qin Yu revealed a look of surprise. Of course, it wasn't obvious, but it was just enough for Yin Ping to see. He faintly smiled and lowered his voice to say in Qin Yu's ear, "Junior apprentice brother Qin, these fellow Taoists aren't familiar with you. In order to prevent you from being ostracized, I will take the liberty of making a promise to them. When we act, you will be responsible for the crucial step. Of course, junior apprentice brother Qin does not need to worry about your safety. Since we are going to act, we have already made all the necessary preparations. Moreover, after you do this, you will be able to obtain their trust and also obtain some benefits." Qin Yu hesitated. Yin Ping lightly said, "Junior apprentice brother Qin, you already know many things. If you refuse, it will be difficult for me." With a stick and a carrot in hand, this boy was playing with his hands quite smoothly. Qin Yu sneered inwardly. His expression wavered for a long time before he clenched his teeth and agreed. Yin Ping immediately laughed. "Good. From now on, junior apprentice brother Qin is one of us." This was a secret signal that indicated Qin Yu's agreement. There was laughter all around. Firstly, they didn't need to personally act. This was definitely a good thing. Secondly, there was a new ruthless person in the Peach Blossom Garden called Qin Yu. Today, they would have another person surnamed Qin kill a disciple of the Peach Blossom Garden. Just thinking about it made them feel interested. Qin, he not bad. Amidst the laughter, Qin Yu also laughed, although he was a bit forced. But in his heart, he was laughing. No matter what this bunch of bastards said, with the old turtle around, he didn't miss a single word, giving up a crucial step to avoid being contaminated by karma. This was a good plan, but it also saved him a great deal of trouble. Laugh, laugh, laugh. Now that you've laughed enough, you can cry later. After all, in Qin Yu's opinion, if one's heart was filled with grief and fear and yet they couldn't cry, that was a very inhumane thing to do. So, he was likely a relatively soft-hearted and kind-hearted person. After confirming that Qin Yu would act, everyone had a short discussion and then scattered in all directions. As if in order to prevent any accidents from occurring at the last moment, Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak didn't participate. Instead, They stayed together with Qin Yu, saying some comforting words and even promising him a flatbread that could make one drool. But in truth, they were monitoring him. Qin Yu pretended as if he had been seduced, and his heart was surging with excitement. As he practiced acting skills with the two of them, his eyes weren't idle either. He casually glanced around and was able to figure out what was going on. Cough, cough, fine, that was a bit of a boast. In truth, after the old turtle saw through it, he told Qin Yu everything. These bastards were laying down an array formation, and it was an extremely vicious and horrifying array formation. They had actually borrowed the strength of the Lost Garden. If one really fell into their trap and fell into this array formation, it would be extremely dangerous. No wonder they dared to have ideas about the disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden. It was because they had this hidden card up their sleeves. But since they saw through it and had Qin Yu do it, humph humph, these bastards were quite cautious. They had made some specific arrangements in case Qin Yu didn't cooperate. But as he listened to the old turtle speak a few words, Qin Yu's heart calmed down. He looked at the smiling Yin Ping in front of him and thought that if Yin Ping knew that this card was destined to be useless, what sort of expression would he have? It would be quite amusing. There was no hurry. When the time came, he would naturally be able to enjoy it. The great array formation was finally completed. Everyone began to leave, using various methods to hide their auras. At this point, one could see just how fierce the background of the Saint Path was. Although, Qin Yu didn't think much of these people. Cough, cough, that's right. He was a bit inflated. After he had killed the saint twice, he had also been chosen by the Garden Master to become a member of the 4.5-man squad. Their goal was to become the ruler. It would be a lie to say that his mentality hadn't changed. But the scene in front of him gave Qin Yu a warning. This was because the methods these bastards used to hide their auras were actually quite exquisite. If it weren't for the old turtle, he wouldn't have been able to discover a single one of them. Although they had borrowed the power of the array formation, this alone was enough to startle him. This was because, in other words, if today's plan had been to scheme against him, then without the old turtle reminding him, there was a 99% chance he would have been tricked. A group of people who really had a way to scheme against him and take his life couldn't be underestimated. Qin Yu's inflated ego quietly shattered. Yin Ping took out a jade slip and probed it with his divine sense. Then, he took a deep breath, and his eyes burst out with a sharp light as he looked straight at Qin Yu. They're here! With such a grand scene and so many people participating, just who was the target? Qin Yu looked up into the distance. Several breaths of time later, there was the sound of breaking air. The first thing that entered his ears were some vague conversations. But this was enough for Qin Yu to conclude that his previous judgment had been wrong. The target was actually him. Shua! Shua! Two figures entered his field of vision. One of them had clothes as white as snow, without a speck of dust. His eyes were indifferent and clear. This was the Peach Garden's third senior apprentice brother, Bai Feng. At this time, he frowned and looked at the person beside him. Is this the place you were talking about? Standing beside him was another cultivator. His appearance was ordinary, but his eyes were bright. It was like he was the focal point of a person's gaze, making his entire face seem a bit livelier. He nodded solemnly. Mr. Third, rest assured, if I didn't have full confidence, I wouldn't have dared to tell you. At this time, a faint fluctuation suddenly spread out from the front. This person revealed a happy expression. Mr. Third, it's over there. As he spoke, his figure flickered and he threw himself over. A clump of straw mushrooms on the ground suddenly shattered. Smoke flashed, and it turned into a running white rabbit. Its speed was astonishing, as if it were a bolt of white lightning. Although the person who attacked was fast, he was still much slower than the rabbit. Mr. Third, hurry up and attack. It's running away. Bai Feng frowned. He felt that something was wrong with this place. But the Lost Garden had always been like this. Treasures and dangers coexisted together. This thing would definitely be helpful to junior apprentice Sister Peach, Maiden's injuries. Thinking of this, he didn't hesitate any longer. He stepped forwards and pressed his hand down. Bang! The void rumbled and a giant hand appeared. It was like a demon god had attacked from the highest heavens. It instantly locked onto the aura of the fleeing white rabbit. It fiercely looked up, a look of panic on its face. But its red eyes were incomparably calm. Bai Feng's heart skipped a beat. His reaction was extremely fast, but just as he retreated, he forcefully stopped himself. This was because the array formation had moved. Chapter 1256. For an array formation to be praised as very fierce by the old turtle, its strength wasn't just for show. Bai Feng had a noble bloodline and similarly possessed keen intuition. He instantly determined his situation and his complexion darkened. He had been tricked. His junior apprentice sister, Peach Girl of the EC, had appeared in the Lost Garden again. It seemed that the Peach Garden had been far too peaceful these past years, so peaceful that many people had forgotten just what the Peach Garden was like in the past. This was also good. Today, he would use the blood of these people to awaken their forgotten memories. Recently, Bai Feng had been filled with sorrow, but he had no one to speak of it to. He could only endure it alone, so his mood was likely very poor. So after he determined that he had been tricked, he was both angry and excited. He finally had a chance to vent. As a descendant of a peak ancient bloodline, no matter how gentle and polite he appeared, he couldn't completely abandon the cruel and ruthless nature ingrained in his bones. But soon, Bai Feng's eyes turned blood-red. He helplessly discovered that his opponent was this array formation. He wanted to kill someone, but couldn't even see a shadow. This was undoubtedly a sad matter. Moreover, what left Bai Feng increasingly uneasy was that as time passed, the strength of this array formation grew stronger and stronger. This clearly wasn't normal. When he attacked before, he had already destroyed the array formation. There was no mistake about this. If the array formation wasn't weak and was instead growing stronger, there must be something strange about it. He couldn't stay here for long. Bai Feng lifted a hand and pressed forward. The temperature in the air began to rapidly fall. A pale white color appeared, covering the surrounding space. Kacha! Kacha! With a cracking sound, the frozen space began to break apart. Bai Feng took a step forwards. But the moment he entered, a dull explosion sounded out from the shattered space. Bai Feng was sent flying backwards, his face pale with shock and anger. There was a fist mark on his chest. His body was pitch black and contrasted with his white clothes, making him appear even more striking. If one looked at him, they would instinctively feel a chill rise in their hearts. In the next moment, a figure walked out from the shattered space. It was another Bai Feng. His aura and appearance were completely the same. It was just that this Bai Feng's robes were as black as the night, and his eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. Array spirit. Bai Feng took a deep breath. His eyes became increasingly dignified. He certainly knew how difficult it was for an array formation to form an array spirit. Not to mention that it was an array spirit that had completely replicated him. Today's encirclement was absolutely not simple. It seemed that someone had already decided to kill the disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden before the Lost Garden opened. At that moment, Bai Feng felt somewhat regretful. If he had not insisted on staying with his eldest senior brother and Lei Xiaoyu, perhaps he would not have encountered such a situation. After all, it was likely that no one would dare to scheme against their first senior brother in the Lost Garden. However, this thought disappeared in a flash. At this point, regret was obviously useless. Looks like I have to risk my life today. With that thought in mind, Bai Feng's eyes shone brightly, and a cry suddenly rang out. A giant phoenix appeared above his head, and it spread its wings. Every feather was as white as snow, sparkling and translucent, without the slightest impurity. Following the appearance of the phoenix, the temperature in the air plummeted at an alarming rate. White icicles condensed and slowly fell to the ground. Kacha! Kacha! Every piece of icicle that came into contact with the ground would release a terrifyingly low temperature, causing the ground to instantly freeze and form a layer of solid ice. The phoenix's eyes flashed like lightning as it stared at the black-clothed Bai Feng. As if sensing something, its eyes filled with anger. This was an ancient peak life form that was once the ruler of this world. Although it had fallen into desolation, its dignity could not be offended. The black-clothed Bifong that the erased spirit had replicated had the same aura and strength. It had already violated the most important aspect of ancient life forms, the purity and nobility of one's bloodline. With another cry, the falling icicles froze. Then they howled out, their speed so fast that it was difficult for the naked eye to follow them as they shot towards the black-clothed Bifong. But as the icicles approached the black-clothed Bifong, they hesitated and slowly came to a stop. The phoenix angrily screamed. Above the black-clothed Bifang's head, a second phoenix appeared. Its feathers were pitch black, and they emitted an endless chill. Its eyes were cold and callous as it stared at the phoenix. They were similarly callous and filled with killing intent. They had even completed the replication of the ice phoenix bloodline. Bifang's heart sank. He discovered that he had underestimated the other party's preparations. To accomplish this was astonishingly difficult, and a tremendous price had to be paid. It seemed that they were truly determined to keep him here. The phoenix could feel the thought of having a bloodline descendant. It angrily cried out and rushed forwards. The black phoenix spread its wings. In the next moment, it was like two bolts of lightning, one black and one white. The two of them collided together. Rumble, rumble. There was a terrifying explosion, and broken feathers rained down. With the black and white phoenixes as the center, a terrifyingly low temperature recklessly spread outwards. The world was thoroughly frozen. The black-clothed Bifong stepped forwards. He lifted a hand and pressed down. What he used was the same method that Bifong had used to tear through space. Kacha! Kacha! Faint sounds constantly came from all around him. This was the sound of space being frozen by the power of extreme cold. Umph! With a cold sneer, Bifong lifted a hand and grasped forwards. The power of extreme cold gathered around his 5 fingers. He forcefully clenched his fist. An invisible power of cold manifested, forming a transparent ice bead. The phantom of a black phoenix appeared within. Strength endlessly poured into the ice bead. Not only did it not increase in size, but it shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. A bit of white frost appeared on the black-clothed Bifang's body. It gradually spread until it covered his eyebrows and hair. Borrowing the strength of his opponent's attack to condense the phantom of a black phoenix and then counterattack Bifang's body, this was a marvelous operation. It was clear from this that Bifong had extremely high attainments in the power of ice. But the reason this was called a copy was because the strength of both sides was exactly the same. There was no difference at all. The black-clothed Bifong lifted a hand and touched his eyebrows. The white frost covering his body instantly shattered and dissipated. He looked at Bifong, his voice calm and indifferent. "You are me, and I am you. How can these methods kill me?" Bifong shook his head. "I am indeed me, but you are only a spirit condensed from an array formation. How can you compare to the Icewind clan?" The black-clothed Bifong fell silent. He immediately said, "You are right. That is why I am unwilling." He stepped forwards, his eyes increasingly cold. "Since you and I are the same, then if I kill you, perhaps I can seize your mortal body and become a true member of the Icewind clan, forever existing in this world." Bifang's complexion changed. "Someone made you a promise?" The black-clothed Bifong nodded. With the situation having reached this point, there was no longer any need to hide anything. If he succeeded, he would replace the true Bifong. If he failed, he would disappear forever, as if he had never existed in this world. So, what they wanted to do wasn't just to kill him. They hoped that they could complete the possession and replace him with the erased spirit. Strictly speaking, the erased spirit and Bifong had the same aura, so it was impossible to distinguish them. In other words, at that time, there would be another malignant tumor in the peach garden that could explode at any time. Bifong paused. The corners of his lips curled up. "Although I don't know who is behind you, they have underestimated the Yardmaster far too much. Even if you can succeed today, you will absolutely not be able to smoothly hide in the peach garden." Looking at the black cloth by Feng opposite him, he continued, "You are a useless chess piece that could expose them hiding behind the scenes at any time. What do you think those great figures will do to protect themselves? I believe that killing you and pretending that nothing has happened is the best and safest choice. What do you think?" The black cloth by Feng had a calm expression. "What you say is correct. So, if I can really replace you, I will try to escape." Escape? In front of the Saint Tao, there are no secrets in the world. Where can you escape to? Then I will die. But at the very least, before I die, I can live a little longer and take a good look at this world with the identity of a living being. Bai Feng frowned. He wanted to use this method to strike at his opponent's will, but in the end, he failed. After a brief silence, he coldly sneered. "Then let's see whether or not you have the ability." Pa! Between his fingers, the ice bead that had shrunk to half its original size shattered into countless pieces with a light sound. The black cloth by Feng's body trembled. Cracks immediately appeared on his exposed skin. But that was all. He continued forwards. The cracks on his skin rapidly healed and vanished. "I just said that if these methods can't kill you, then they can't kill me either. But now, I am not alone, so the one to die will be you." Bai Feng's heart sank. What the erased spirit replica in front of him said was the truth, even though he still hadn't seen the person who laid down the array today. However, it was obvious that they were hiding in the dark, eyeing him covetously. Perhaps he was waiting for the right moment to strike a fatal blow. Qin Yu inwardly shook his head. If White Phoenix had erupted with strength at the start of the battle, then there might have been a chance she could have broken through the blockade. But now, the array formation had already drawn in the energy of the Lost Garden, and the array spirit clone strength was nearly endless. Although by Feng they could seize the initiative and temporarily gain the upper hand, but even if they were to fight with attrition, they would eventually be unable to hold on. Not to mention, there were also the enemy cultivators who had set up the formation. Their preparations were clearly not limited to these. If he hadn't been there today, Bai Feng would have most likely died. This caused Qin Yu's heart to swell a little. He had just been shattered, but now he was even more vigilant and fearful. Sure enough, being relaxed and careless is bad. Is senior brother Bai Feng strong? Of course, he was very, very strong. The phoenix he summoned just now had a terrifyingly low temperature. To be honest, Qin Yu had only ever experienced such a thing in the Arctic Abyssal Sea, let alone the God Realm experts. Even the original God Realm experts would be frozen to death if they weren't strong enough to resist the cold power. In the end, he was only listed by the Yardmaster as half a member of the 4.5-man team. It was not because he lacked strength or potential. The only problem was his background. The descendants of the ancient life forms that had been eliminated by the vast young world might have been born with great strength, but to this day, not a single one of them could become a ruler. This was a congenital deficiency, a choice made by the will of the world. Against such a strong third senior apprentice brother, a single mistake would spell his doom. Qin Yu certainly had to learn this lesson. While he was silently pondering and constantly warning himself, Yin Ping exchanged a glance with the others, coughed lightly, and said, "Junior brother Qin, it's time for you to make your move. You already know exactly what to do, so remember not to be nervous." When Qin Yu looked up and saw a bit of hesitation in his eyes, Yin Ping warmly smiled and nodded at him. The others also had an expression that said, "I'm very optimistic about you. Don't worry, there won't be any problems." As for what they were thinking in their hearts, these bastards were well aware of it. In fact, Qin Yu also knew. To send someone to die and still act so friendly, they really were a bunch of bastards. But being a bit of a bastard was also good. That way, when he killed them later, there wouldn't be any psychological burden. Qin Yu took a deep breath and clenched his teeth. He cupped his hands together and said, "Senior apprentice brothers, senior apprentice sisters, please remember the promise you made to me. I'm going now." He turned and walked away, his back filled with determination and sorrow. Space twisted for a moment before returning to tranquility. This boy had entered the array. He could be seen from the outside, but when he turned his head, he couldn't see the people present. Everyone's smiles immediately vanished, replaced by indifferent expressions. Their eyes seemed to be saying, "What promise?" Was there? Yin Ping looked at the silent figure in the crowd. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother Zhang, are you sure there won't be any problems?" This was indeed what everyone was most concerned about right now. Their eyes gathered on him. The cultivator, surnamed Zhang, had a light expression. "If this matter is exposed, I and my entire family will die a more miserable death than all of you. So, since I made a move, I will do everything in my power to ensure that nothing goes wrong." After a pause, as if to appease everyone, he continued to say, "Once this person enters the array, he won't be able to act recklessly. Even if he suddenly changes his mind, I am prepared to bury him along with Bai Feng." Everyone calmed down a little. They began to express that they believed in fellow Taoist Zhang's strength. Zhang Zhongshu lowered his head and didn't respond. Everyone was already accustomed to his attitude, so they didn't care. As for why they chose to believe him, it was because Bai Feng's Ice Phoenix clan bloodline was extremely useful in the Lost Garden, so they indeed coveted it. Moreover, this surnamed Zhang had an irreconcilable blood feud with Bai Feng. This wasn't a secret in the Holy Dao Circle. It was likely that before Bai Feng entered the Peach Garden, she had made a breakthrough and her bloodline had taken control of her, causing her to go berserk and commit endless slaughter. It was said that Zhang Zhongshu's wife and a pair of children were killed at that time. Their deaths were extremely miserable. After all, a descendant of an ice phoenix who had gone berserk couldn't be expected to be rational. The Holy Dao Circle was just a general term. The sages and their subordinates could all be considered members of this circle. But it didn't mean that one couldn't be a member of this circle without the support of a sage. The Zhang family was an exception. They didn't have a sage Dao and weren't a subordinate of any holy land, but they were recognized as absolutely qualified to occupy a place in the Holy Dao Circle. This was because if the Zhang family claimed to be second in the vast Yang world in terms of the Dao of array formations, no one would dare to stand out and claim supremacy. After the massacre, the Zhang family used their influence to launch an encirclement and almost forced Bai Feng into a desperate situation. It wasn't until the yard master intervened that the matter came to an end. After receiving the compensation from the Peach Garden, the Zhang family settled the matter. But this didn't represent Zhang Zhongshu's attitude. In fact, the Peach Garden didn't investigate further, even though there were several more incidents after that. However, his hatred for Bai Feng was something that practically everyone in the Saint Dao Circle knew about. Chapter 1257. Such a Zhang Zhongshu was naturally trustworthy. If it weren't so easy, who would dare to take the lead and besiege the disciples of Peach Garden? Over the years, the yard master had been explaining the profound in simple terms, with a sense of self-cultivation. However, as a member of the Divine Tao Circle, they naturally knew that when the Peach Garden was first built, the yard master, who had attained Tao as an alien, had slaughtered many talents to forge her current reputation. Because of fear, they trusted. Anyone who participated in today's matter was equally guilty. No one dared to reveal anything to the outside world. Otherwise, not only would they be finished, but their families would also be implicated. The people of Peach Garden had never been good people. This was also the reason why these cultivators dared to join forces. They were sure that everyone would rather die than keep the secret. When he heard the old turtle speak of this array formation, he was afraid, but in the end, he had only heard it from the side. Now that he was inside, he could truly feel how terrifying this array formation was. In the abyss, he had grasped the art of observing the world. Although he couldn't see it clearly, he had still gained something from his ignorance. No matter how exquisite this array formation was, it couldn't compare with the world. Moreover, he was inside it, so he could see it clearly, but seeing it clearly didn't mean he could break it. Luckily, there was the old turtle. This fellow gave Qin Yu the impression that he was omnipotent. The old turtle vaguely sensed Qin Yu's thoughts and felt proud. "Boy, you finally opened your eyes and learned who a true divinity is." Cough. But in this case, if he were to simply destroy the formation, while he would still be able to achieve his goal, he still felt that it wasn't perfect enough. In particular, Qin Yu had just recognized who a true divinity was. He had to strike while the iron was hot and reinforce this impression in his heart. Then he could only think of a way to increase the difficulty. If there wasn't any difficulty, he had to create it. With these thoughts in mind, the old turtle coughed lightly, displaying the demeanor of an expert, and lightly said, "Master, to me, breaking this formation is as easy as turning over my hand. But to do so is too wasteful. Please listen to me briefly." Then, he explained in the tone of a great master. The general summary was, if the array spirit could be subdued, it would be beneficial to Master's cultivation. Ever since Qin Yu learned of Peach Girl's situation from the Garden Master and became a member of the 4.5-person squad, although he appeared calm on the surface, he was actually very anxious. After all, that was a sovereign. He was said to be above the heavens, laughing proudly in the myriad of worlds. He was the known cultivation limit of the Haoyang world, an existence that surpassed the Permitha true saint. Although he had walked the true divinity path, original divinity, Saint Tao, and other similar realms were meaningless to him, the difference in strength was still the same. Although Qin Yu had killed a saint twice, his real competence was at peak of original God realm at most. He could resist the saint path for a while, but he couldn't endure it for a long time. Of course, this was referring to Qin Yu's state before he entered the Lost Garden. He had absorbed the source of life and borrowed the trial field of the rules to cultivate. Although it hadn't been long, the speed at which he perceived the rules was far too terrifying, and his strength had clearly risen to a new level. But even so, he was still far from his goal, far enough to make him despair. Even if Qin Yu's heart was strong enough that he wouldn't suppress himself because of this, he still subconsciously desired to increase his strength. Since it was something that could aid his cultivation, he would naturally give it a try. He carefully listened to the old turtle speak. There was a bit of difficulty, and he would have to do it himself. But that didn't mean there was no chance of success. There was nothing to hesitate about. Let's do it. The old turtle smiled in satisfaction. As he expected, this brat Qin, you seem to be on steroids right now. He was filled with an urgent desire to cultivate. He had already noticed this when he was borrowing the source of life to cultivate. It had to be known that in a state of absorbing the source of life and also restraining one's own laziness, it wasn't easy at all. Once he succeeded this time, his unfathomable and omnipotent image as the shadow of the abyss would inevitably become more stable. He wouldn't need to fear that Qin Yu wouldn't lower his head and value him even more. Cough, cough. Why was he full of confidence? That's right, the difficulty of this matter had been a bit exaggerated. To be a living shadow, one also needed acting skills and strategies. What's wrong with using an appropriate method to obtain greater benefits without harming others? Qin Yu stopped. He took a deep breath and slowly reached out a hand. Outside the array formation, Zhang Zhongshi looked up. He stared at Qin Yu's back, surprise flashing in his eyes. This position was slightly off from what he had been told before. But this wasn't a problem. As long as he entered the approximate range, he could gather the strength of the array formation and stimulate the array spirit to go crazy, pulling White Phoenix down with him. To those present, killing Peach Garden White Phoenix was a matter that was placed at the forefront of their lives, so they were naturally cautious. Zhang Zhongshi's change in expression couldn't be hidden from them. All of them paled. Fellow Taoist Zhang, how is it? One of them asked. Zhang Zhongshi was silent for a moment. He shook his head. It's fine. It really was fine. At least on the surface, besides the slight deviation in position and the fact that his attacks were a bit slow and jerky, everything was basically correct. As for the strength of the array formation, it had already begun to gather and fuse into the array spirit's body, constantly stimulating it until it went crazy. To destroy a peak array spirit to an array formation cultivator, this was an extremely difficult matter to accept. But in Zhang Zhongshi's eyes, everything was worth it. Ever since his wife and son were killed and his family was forced to settle things, he had already died. All he had been alive these past years was just an empty shell. Killing White Phoenix and taking revenge for his wife and son was the only obsession that kept him alive to this day. As long as he could kill White Phoenix, let alone an array spirit, even if he had to pay with his life, what did it matter? White Phoenix felt the pressure. The strength that the array spirit's replica erupted with was becoming stronger and stronger. He was gradually falling into a disadvantage. And as time passed, White Phoenix could sense that the replica was becoming more and more violent. Gradually, it even gave off a feeling that it was about to go out of control. Taking a deep breath, White Phoenix's heart sank. He vaguely guessed the thoughts of the person who laid down the array formation, to use the array spirit as a sacrifice to drag him into hell. If White Phoenix could sense that something was wrong, then the array spirit had naturally sensed it long ago. But as White Phoenix had said before, he was ultimately only an array spirit, born from the condensation of the array formation. Even if he had an independent consciousness, he couldn't interfere with the operation of the array formation. This was different from what they had agreed on before. His master had lied to him. The array spirit was furious, and this anger accelerated the collapse of his consciousness. The blood-red color in White Phoenix's eyes became thicker and thicker. At this time, the voice of the old turtle sounded in the array spirit's ears. "Are you angry? Do you find it hard to accept? Now, I can give you a chance to continue living. Leave the shackles of the array formation and see the world with your own eyes. Then, do you accept?" The array spirit's thoughts fluctuated. "I accept." Old turtle, so fast, so direct. Didn't he need to think about it? It seemed this was easier than he had imagined. No, it was 10 times easier. This was troublesome. When he spoke to Chinyu just now, in order to raise his own contribution and strengthen his own merits, he had said many things, such as "this matter is extremely difficult, I don't have much confidence, master needs to think carefully," and so on. Well, the result was that the moment he turned his head, it was completed. This was simply slapping him in the face. Cough. The old turtle hesitated. "In truth, you can think about it some more." The array spirit said, "There is no need." "You do." Array spirit. If it weren't for the fact that he was facing a life or death situation and that the owner of this voice was his only chance of survival, the array spirit would have already erupted. "Are you playing with me? You're the one who took the initiative to strike up a conversation, and I have already agreed. So why are you making excuses? What are you doing?" The old turtle continued to say, "In short, you need to think about it. Don't ask why, just persist a little longer and make it seem more real. I can help you exist for a little longer." His voice became serious. "You should know that your body has flaws. At most 2 months, that is the limit I can give you." The array spirit readily agreed. To be able to see its problems and also easily communicate with it at this time, it absolutely had the qualifications to fulfill the promise it made before. Wasn't it just delaying things a little and making things a little more difficult? In truth, this matter was easy to understand and simple. It just so happened that the array spirit found Bai Feng very displeasing to the eye. It said that it was me and Bai Feng was an array spirit. If it didn't know this better than it did, why would it need to remind it? Just because it didn't know how to speak, it had to beat it up. Then, the array spirit became increasingly violent and Bai Feng was beaten up. Although it wasn't too miserable, it still looked distressed on the surface. After condensing the strength of the array spirit was walking on the edge of self-detonation. For a short period of time, this was the same as erupting with its full strength. Of course, its strength was terrifying. Outside the array, for some unknown reason, Zhang Zhongshi felt a little restless. Amidst the excited and expectant gazes of everyone, he suddenly stepped forward and pressed his hand down. Zhang Zhongshi didn't wait any longer. He was going to activate his backup plan and sacrifice Chinyu as well. He was going to thoroughly drive the array spirit crazy and end Bai Feng's life. A tremor erupted from where his hand fell, instantly sweeping out. Then, there was no then. The array formation was still there. Although the array spirit had gone crazy, it hadn't completely gone berserk. There was a problem. Zhang Zhongshi paled. The nearby cultivators weren't stupid. As they saw this, their hearts shrank, and they nearly cursed out loud. Surnamed Jean Bastard, we trusted you so much in vain. Things have come to this point, and you're actually having diarrhea at the critical moment? Damn it. It was no wonder he hadn't been able to take revenge for his wife and child, even after being hammered several times by the peach orchard these past years. But anger was anger. Right now, everyone was in the same boat. There was no need to say anything and just hurry up and think a way to make up for it. But before everyone could suppress their anger and speak, Chinyu suddenly turned his head and smiled at them. This smile was light, but as it fell into everyone's eyes, it caused them to catch their breath. Because of their tumbling anger, their hearts suddenly skipped a beat. Their first thought was that this boy could see them. Then, not good, the problem was with him. Shua, everyone's eyes instantly focused on Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak. A boy from an impoverished family was the best choice for a scapegoat. Motherfucker, you two bastards, when did you go blind? After sending by phone flying away with a punch, the array spirit's momentum reached the limit and then it suddenly vanished from sight. That's right, it was like a shadow or a bubble. Like this, without any warning, it vanished from everyone's eyes. Then, the array formation broke. The array spirit was condensed from the array formation and was its source of strength. But now, the array spirit that had gathered nearly all of the array formation's strength disappeared, instantly collapsing the array formation. Bai Feng was stunned. Then, she saw the space in front of her distort and Chinyu step out. He cupped his hands together and said, "Fellow Taoist Bai Feng, I am old friends with Peach Blossom Garden, so I came here to save you." The Garden Master's disguise was indeed powerful, but at such a close distance, it couldn't hide from Bai Feng, who was also a disciple of Peach Blossom Garden. Seeing her eyes widen, Chinyu hurriedly blinked. Bai Feng swallowed the words that were at the tip of her tongue. She looked at Chinyu in front of her, her heart filled with complex emotions. In truth, when she first heard that her junior apprentice sister Peach, Maiden, wanted to be together with him, she really wanted to tear Chinyu to shreds. In order not to lose face or do something impulsive that she would regret, Bai Feng had chosen to go into seclusion. This could be considered a form of self-imprisonment. After leaving seclusion, she had followed her eldest senior apprentice brother and junior apprentice sister to the Lost Garden. But she never imagined that she would meet Chinyu here and even have her life saved by him. Although the array spirit had suddenly disappeared, and the reason for it was still unknown, it was clear that all of this was related to Chinyu. She hadn't even thought about what attitude she should have in the future when she faced Chinyu, but now she owed him a life-saving debt. This was a sin. Bai Feng's thoughts raced, and she fell silent for a time. Chinyu's eyes flashed. He coughed and said, "I have a deep relationship with the Peach Garden, so helping you is my duty. Mr. Bai Feng, there is no need to worry." In other words, he was saying that it was his duty to save her and that her senior apprentice brother didn't need to feel any pressure. But then again, to say such words at this time, cough, cough, no matter how you looked at it, it felt as if he were deliberately reminding her. Of course, Chinyu wouldn't admit that this was what he was thinking. Bai Feng was his senior apprentice brother in the Peach Garden, and he was also tyrannically strong. If Bai Feng bore a grudge against him because of Peach Maiden, there would definitely be trouble. And most importantly, there wasn't any substantial relationship between him and Peach Maiden. He absolutely couldn't eat such a loss. Thus, when he schemed against Bai Feng, Chinyu didn't feel any burden in his heart. Originally, it was because she didn't understand the truth and misunderstood him, so she naturally had to bear the consequences. And indeed, after hearing these words, Bai Feng took a deep breath. She cupped her hands together and bowed. The disciples of the Peach Garden clearly distinguish between gratitude and grudges. Your great graciousness today, Bai Feng will remember it. Chinyu waved his hand, saying that he didn't need to. Inwardly, he relaxed. With today's words, he wouldn't need to worry about her in the future. Bai Feng was an extremely proud person. She wouldn't do anything that would slap her in the face. Without even needing to guess, she knew that her third senior apprentice brother was definitely in a bad mood right now. Since he had obtained what he wanted, he needed to hurry up and vent his anger. Chinyu turned and pointed a finger. Mr. Bifeng, they're the ones who schemed against you. Then, there was no need to say anything more. Bifeng clenched her teeth and rushed forwards. One couldn't help but admit that the cultivators of the Holy Tao Circle had many methods. In particular, they were certain that if they couldn't kill Bifeng today, no one would have a good ending. They couldn't escape. Even if they could escape today, would the Peach Garden just forget about it? They were simply too naive. Rather than being filled with fear in the future, or even being punished and forced to apologize to the Peach Garden on their own initiative, they might as well go all out today and perhaps kill Bifeng. No matter how strong he was just one person. They might be weaker than him, but there were many of them. From the very start, the slaughter entered a white-hot state. As Chinyu watched Bifeng reveal his true form and transform into a giant ice phoenix, he swept through the crowd with disdain. With a single breath, he froze a person to death. With another breath, he killed another. Seeing this, Chinyu couldn't help but praise his previous actions. This little trick was truly well played. Otherwise, he might have been frozen into a block of ice in the future. As Chinyu was admiring White Phoenix's slaughter, some people's hateful gazes fell on him. It was obvious that the reason their perfect plan had been completely ruined and they had been forced to risk their lives was all because of this bastard. Regardless of whether or not he could kill Bifeng, he had to die. Kill him. Tear him to pieces. Grind his bones to ashes. Their words were filled with hatred. As Chinyu faced these people, he became increasingly certain that besides some hidden cards in his hand, there was still a great disparity in strength between him and senior apprentice brother Bifeng. But at the very least, protecting himself wasn't too difficult. Even if he didn't use the power of light and darkness and the power of space and time, his true divinity Tao was more than enough to deal with these red-eyed cultivators who wished they could swallow him alive. Of course, as he dealt with them, he also put on a perilous appearance that gave off a feeling that he would collapse at any moment. After all, if he didn't do this, how could he have hooked up these people? Today, whether it was Bifeng or Chinyu, neither planned on letting these people leave alive. Chapter 1258. When it came to fishing, as long as a fish was smart enough, it would eventually realize that something was wrong. Moreover, this was a group of cultivators from the St. Tao Circle. Even though they were blinded by anger and hatred, they still managed to quickly respond. Their eyes were fierce and filled with hatred, as well as fear and dread. After glaring at Chinyu, they turned and left. They couldn't kill Chinyu, and they couldn't kill Bifeng. Now, there were less than a third of those still breathing. Everyone knew that as the number of people continued to decrease, those that remained would die faster and faster. Those from the St. Tao Circle also had the qualifications to enter the Lost Garden. Even if they couldn't compare with peak Holy Lands, for better or worse, they were still young elites that were valued. Although they had thought things through, none of them could face death head-on. They had to escape. If he were to survive today, there was still a chance for him to silence Bifeng. As long as Bifeng's death was not witnessed by anyone, even though there was a high chance that the Peach Blossom Garden would still hunt her down, she would still have some room to struggle. Fine, the chances of surviving weren't high, but at least they wouldn't die today. As long as they lived, everything was possible. If they died, everything would be for naught. Whether it was an ostrich mentality or a fluke mentality, they decided to escape. However, when those people turned around to leave, they discovered that a giant net had silently formed in the space they were in. All of them had become fish in that net, their hearts filled with shock and anger. Their eyes gathered on Chinyu. He looked up at the completely unfamiliar face and brightly smiled. If you help a Buddha to the west, then help him to the end. Mr. Bifeng's anger is still burning, so you might as well stay behind and accept it. What kind of nonsense was he spouting? It was clear they had fallen for a trap. This boy in front of them was simply a best actor. Kill him. With a roar, he turned and rushed forwards. In truth, these people had already guessed that Chinyu wouldn't be easy to deal with. This could be seen from the giant net he had quietly formed. But if they wanted to escape, they had no other choice. They had to kill him first. A fierce battle erupted once more. This time, it was a true battle. Chinyu had no choice but to deal with it with 120% caution. The large net that was woven from the laws of this space instantly shook violently. If he used light and darkness together with the power of space and time, it would be much easier to deal with this. But after seeing the peak St. Tao Circle cultivators gathered in the Lost Garden, Chinyu didn't want to expose himself. Then he could only endure it. Puff, he spat out a mouthful of blood. As he turned to look at his senior apprentice brother White Phoenix, who was slaughtering his way through, he sighed with emotion. Luckily, he had the foresight to eliminate a great danger first. The stone pagoda was excited. Although its main body was in the distant dark region, this didn't prevent it from clearly sensing Qin Yu's current situation. He thought to himself, Good, Qin, to think that you would have such a day. This is the result of burning the bridge after crossing the river, wantonly slandering and bullying the pagoda. This wretched heavens must have felt that I've been too harsh all these years and decided to give me some compensation. If this was the case, then he would make this compensation even fiercer. In any case, it was impossible for these people to play with Qin Yu to death. The stone pagoda had no idea that its current reaction was being monitored by a certain treacherous fellow. Ever since he had determined that in Qin Yu's heart he was a tall and imposing figure, the old turtle began to refer to himself as the shadow of the abyss. He was determined to make Qin Yu bow his head to him and respect him day by day. Not only did this require his own strength and effort, but he also needed to ensure that in Qin Yu's heart he had a unique and supreme status. After experiencing the training in the trial field of the laws, the old turtle felt that this stone pagoda fellow had a slight chance of attacking his status. Of course, it was only a small possibility, one that could almost be ignored. But even so, he absolutely couldn't allow this to happen. This was what it meant to guard against small things and nip them in the bud. Caution and caution were the greatest virtues of the shadow. The reason he was able to remain safe until today was because of these two qualities. Otherwise, did he really think that when he was in the abyss, the will of the abyss hadn't made any other attempts to erase him? Haha, how naive. But in front of someone as cautious as him, he had still been seen through. Now that vast Yang had arrived, although he had escaped from the shadow of the abyss, he couldn't lose these virtues. Thus, the old turtle felt that he could start a small live broadcast. Thus, Qin Yu soon sensed the jubilant cheers of the stone pagoda coming from afar. Qin Yu's lips twitched and a cold sneer flashed in his eyes. What a good stone pagoda. I'll remember this debt. Moreover, there was also that bastard old turtle. At this time, he was still watching his master being hammered to the point of vomiting blood, and yet he still had the mood to do such things. He was simply disgraceful to the extreme. He would also remember this. But now wasn't the time to settle accounts. He had to put in some effort first. Qin Yu lightly coughed. He said in his heart, As a dignified shadow of the abyss, I can only watch as my master is being hammered to the point of vomiting blood, and yet I'm not doing anything. Moreover, I'll lose face. The old turtle seriously thought about it, and felt that these words were reasonable. No matter what was said, this fellow Qin Yu was still his master. As the saying went, one had to look at the shadow before beating the master. These bastards weren't giving him, the dignified shadow of the abyss, any face at all. Humph, this was only in Vastyong. If this were the abyss, he could casually pinch his hand, and these bastards would be reduced to dregs. Even so, it wouldn't be too difficult to kill them. Master, at this critical moment, you still need me to help you. But the consumption of strength is not small. You must think of a way to repay me. His tone was calm and relaxed, displaying the demeanor of a great and virtuous master. However, there was a trace of weakness in his voice and a bit of apprehension in his heart. Compared to before, the meaning behind these words was a step further. If Qin Yu, no problem, I will definitely repay you. Qin Yu readily agreed. His heart was at ease. The old turtle immediately felt that in this contest with Qin Yu, he had already gained the upper hand. As he thought, the decision to strike while the iron was hot was the correct one. He was too smart, too quick-witted, and too capable. If this continued, he wouldn't have to worry about subduing Chinyu. At that time, even if he took the title of master, so what? The one who was truly in charge was him. Cough, so it's like that. All right then, I will cooperate with master and deal with these people first. Chinyu smiled and nodded. The cold sneer in his heart was like a cold winter wind, piercing straight into the deepest parts of his bones. You think I gave you face, Him? Perhaps he could beat him at his own game. Vaguely, Chinyu had grasped the old turtle's mentality. Since this was the case, he might as well use this method to make him work harder in the future. On the surface, he would listen to him and praise the old turtle high and mighty. Then, when he grew impatient in the future, he would stomp him into the mud. That would definitely feel good. As his thoughts raced, Chinyu's smile became increasingly bright. Across from him, a group of cultivators from the Saint Dao circle watched as Chinyu was hammered until he spat out blood and was in a distressed state. All of them giggled to themselves, feeling a cold chill run up from their tailbone all the way to the top of their heads. This fellow was likely a madman. At the very least, he was a freak. From his appearance, he seemed to be a temperamental person. This sort of person was the most difficult to deal with. Who knew whether or not they would be dragged into the grave with him if they were pushed too far? Thinking this, the people that had surrounded Chinyu paused for a moment and quietly drew back. After all, on the surface, it seemed that Chinyu had reached his limit. They would never have imagined that after Chinyu's final smile, a shadow that came from the abyss, a shadow that reflected one of the most terrifying existences in the world, had already decided to attack in order to consolidate his supreme position in Chinyu's heart. Stone Pagoda? Humph. He was plotted against and didn't even know it. What qualifications did he have to contend with him? From now on, Chinyu would listen to him. If one had to say who hated Chinyu the most out of the people that laid down this array formation to kill him, it would be Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak. This was a simple logic. Chinyu was brought here by the two of them, and they recommended him to everyone on their own initiative to be their scapegoat, their safety wire. The result was like this. If they didn't kill him, then let alone the Peach Blossom Garden's revenge, even everyone that participated in this matter wouldn't let them off. In addition, White Phoenix was far too strong. She spat out mouthfuls of cold air one after another, making one want to pee in their pants. Thus, from the very start, the two of them had chosen Chinyu as their target. It had to be said that these two fellow apprentice brothers had very similar dispositions. For instance, they would retreat as soon as they saw the situation turn bad. Everyone else retreated, but they didn't retreat as thoroughly as the two of them, running all the way to the outermost perimeter. There were two reasons for them to make this decision. First, Chinyu's smile was strange, and second, there was definitely a problem with this Chin boy's identity. It had to be known that he had walked the path of the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands and followed them to the Lost Garden. But today he had saved the Peach Blossom Garden and White Phoenix. Wasn't this obvious enough? A fellow of unknown origin that even the half-sage of Dragon Mountain didn't know about. It looked like he was going to go all out. If they didn't run, what else could they do? In fact, these two people were extremely intelligent. At the very least, their thoughts were incomparably correct. But no matter how far they retreated, they couldn't stop Chinyu from killing them first. The reason was simple. These two people knew the most about him and were most likely able to guess certain things. For instance, his surname was Chin, and he had saved White Phoenix and entered the Lost Garden through the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands. Although the probability wasn't particularly high, being cautious was a virtue. In this aspect, Chinyu's thinking was very similar to that of the old turtle. Behind the crowd, Yin Ping, who was prepared to flee at any moment, widened his eyes at this moment. His heart violently shrank as he felt a terrifying aura that was almost tangible. In the next moment, before he could react, his entire body froze in place. Puff! With a muffled sound, a bloody hole opened up on his forehead. The hole penetrated through his brain and exploded backward, bringing along a series of red and white substances. His mouth gurgled twice, and sticky blood gushed out. His corpse fell down with a thud, and his aura was instantly emptied. Shinyu retracted his hand. His expression was calm, but he sighed inwardly. In the end, he had exposed himself a little too much. Although the Tao of space wasn't as rare as the Tao of light and darkness, there weren't many people who could truly comprehend it in the holy Tao circle. In the Peach Garden, the eldest and second brothers had comprehended it, which made them seem like cabbages. Don't forget that these two were recognized by the Garden Master as valiant existences who had a chance of breaking through to the ruler realm. In the entire vast Yang world, they were the top existences among the younger generation. Cautious, he had to be cautious. He couldn't expose himself anymore. After all, once his identity was discovered, the West Mountain Nine Heads would definitely not let him go. Facing this powerful figure who could face his eldest senior brother head-on, Chinyu didn't have the slightest confidence. Perhaps he would be forced to reveal all his trump cards and methods. At that time, it would really be fun. Light and darkness as one. Space-time plus one's body. Not to mention anything else. Just these 2 points were enough to drive people crazy. At that time, the ultimate project of the Lost Garden would probably have to be changed from searching for the source of life to hunting Chinyu. After all, the things he had on him were fatally tempting even to the Saint Tao. Even if Chinyu was lucky enough to escape the Lost Garden alive, what awaited him in the future would be endless coveting and encirclement. Even the title of the Peach Garden's son-in-law wouldn't be able to protect him. Just thinking about the consequences made him sweat. Stop, he had to stop. Exposing his trump cards to the Tao of space was already his bottom line. Unless it was a life and death situation, he absolutely couldn't reveal the Tao of time and light and darkness as one. A scream broke the silence of the scene. Long Feng turned and ran, his face twisted. His scream woke everyone up, and they looked at Chinyu with fear in their eyes. Just now, he had pointed a finger forward, and, after a slight distortion in space, Yin Ping died. The Tao of space was easy to accept. After all, although they didn't control this thing, they had heard about it so often that their ears would grow calluses. But how could Chinyu defeat Yin Ping with a single finger? No matter how powerful the Tao of space was, it couldn't be shown off to this extent. There must be something else that they didn't know, and this thing was the main reason why Yin Ping died on the spot. Chapter 1259. Just who was this person? Why did he have such a trump card and patiently wait until he was beaten into a miserable state before taking it out? Was he a masochist? Or, although this trump card was powerful, there was a limit to its use? As everyone's thoughts raced, Qin Yu's complexion changed. This was because at this moment, Long Feng had actually escaped. With the rules of the world as a thread, this net laid down wasn't able to bind him in the least. As he thought about how he had led the way and how they had avoided so many dangers, indeed, this seemingly ignorant and incompetent son of half-Sage Dragon Mountain wasn't simple at all. If he reminded Bai Feng now, there was indeed a chance he could stop him. But after a moment of hesitation, Qin Yu didn't say anything. His intuition told him that Long Feng wasn't easy to deal with. If he insisted on keeping him here, there might be some accident. It seemed that the situation in the Lost Garden was far more complex than he had imagined. Not only were there powerful cultivators like his eldest senior apprentice brother and nine-headed on the surface, but there were likely many others hidden in the shadows, similar to Long Feng's situation. Whatever, there was no need to think too much about this right now. He would first keep these people here. Without stopping his finger, Qin Yu pointed at a second cultivator. This person's complexion wildly changed. He stepped forwards, his aura erupting. After experiencing Yin Ping's death, they were already on guard. Their reaction speed could be said to be fast to the extreme. But it was useless. His body stiffened and his eyes glazed over. Then, with a dull popping sound, a large bloody hole appeared in his forehead. The second, Qin Yu's finger continued to move towards a third person. Thus, in front of everyone's eyes, he killed 3 people 3 times. Corpses littered the ground, and the air filled with the scent of blood. There was no limit, at least in their eyes. Qinyu had killed Yin Ping's group of 3 with ease, without any difficulty at all. Run! This person is terrifying. The remaining people turned and fled. Many people had seen Long Feng escape just now, but unfortunately, they didn't have the ability to ignore the net of rules. Attack! Break through the seal. A cultivator roared out. In the next moment, his body froze. With a dull thud, blood and white flew into the air as he fell to the ground, becoming the 4th corpse today. Could the net of rules be broken? The answer was yes. So, what Qinyu was doing now was not to give them a chance. Whoever made the most noise would be the first to be killed. The people of the sacred Tao circle working together to kill the disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden was a great disaster. However, if he and Bai Feng joined forces to kill them and kill these cultivators, even if they were in the right, they would still cause great trouble. At the very least, the enemies of the Peach Blossom Garden would make a move whenever there was a chance, thinking of ways to send the 2 of them to hell. Thus, it was fine to kill them all. There was no Saint Tao in a Lost Garden, so, as long as he did things cleanly and efficiently, he would be able to avoid a lot of trouble. Bai Feng felt depressed. Although he was wantonly slaughtering and venting the anger in his heart, he didn't forget to pay attention to Qinyu's situation. He had just been saved by Qinyu. If he were to turn around and burn the bridge after crossing the river and watch on helplessly as Qinyu was killed, he couldn't do such a thing. To be honest, Bai Feng was quite pleased to see him spitting out blood after being hammered. This brat had actually snatched away Junior Sister Peach Maiden. He had committed a heinous crime. According to Bai Feng's plan, she would first wait for Qinyu to suffer a bit before acting to save him. Although the graciousness of saving someone's life couldn't be measured, it wasn't something that could be repaid just by saving Qinyu once. But at the very least, she would be a little more at ease when facing Qinyu in the future. But who knew that before Bai Feng could enjoy himself, Qinyu would erupt, blowing out a breath of cold air to kill a cultivator. Although it seemed incomparably powerful, Bai Feng was well aware of his own situation. Bai Feng was enraged and wanted to kill someone in order to regain some face in front of Qinyu. So he used his final trump card. After leaving the Lost Garden, he would need to recuperate for at least several years before he could fully recover. In comparison, Qinyu had been far too relaxed. With just a casual finger, he had killed someone. Moreover, lifting a finger and piercing a hole in an enemy's head would cause their corpse to fall backwards. Compared to him blowing out a breath of cold air and freezing someone into an ice sculpture, this seemed far more advanced. Thinking about it, if he hadn't chosen to go into seclusion and had instead gone to find Qinyu in a fit of rage, the one who would have been hammered might have been him. There was a high chance that the first to fall would have been him. This was because in the entire Peach Garden, who could have imagined that the youngest junior apprentice brother who came the last would have such swift and fierce killing methods? Thinking about it, if he had really gone and been pressed to the ground by a single finger before he could even teach Qinyu a lesson, even if his head was hard enough and he wouldn't die, he would still have lost all face. Fuck, why did it feel like he was the one who needed to rejoice? My script shouldn't have been like this. Wasn't I supposed to silently imprison myself for the sake of the greater good, and to avoid making any mistakes? Thinking about it, Bai Feng's attacks became even heavier. You bastards, you actually dared to attack me. I absolutely cannot forgive you. An hour later, at almost the same time, the people in front of Qinyu and Bai Feng both fell to the ground. The air was thick with the smell of blood. Because the temperature was shockingly low, a dark red fog of blood condensed in the air. Qinyu cupped his hands together. Third senior apprentice brother, your methods are amazing. This junior brother admires you. When there were people around, he had to put on an act. But when there was no one around, he had to reveal his identity and flatter third senior apprentice brother, reminding him not to forget his previous words. Bai Feng's complexion stiffened. She reluctantly said, Junior apprentice Brother Qin praises me too much. Your strength has truly surpassed my expectations. Is he deliberately holding back and waiting for me to finish off my opponents together? Yes, that's it. I, by phone, am the dignified third disciple of Peach Garden. I have always regarded eldest senior apprentice brother and second senior apprentice brother as my goal, but now I actually have to be humbly held back by someone. This was difficult for By phone to accept, but as she thought about it, it seemed reasonable. Just what sort of proud character was their honorable master? He doted on junior apprentice Sister Peach to the extreme. If he weren't a good son-in-law, how could he have rashly betrothed her to someone else? Junior apprentice Brother Chin, you had already used his actions to prove his own extraordinariness. Moreover, their teacher had always had a sharp and accurate vision. As for his feelings towards Peach Garden, it wasn't a secret in Peach Garden. Their honorable master must have sensed it, but he hadn't expressed his feelings yet. Perhaps losing to Chin Yu wasn't injustice. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame himself for not performing well enough. Chin Yu never imagined that his words would cause his third senior apprentice brother to fall into a circle of self-denial and depression. Seeing Chin Yu remain silent, he thought for a moment and said, "Third senior apprentice brother, we can't stay here for long. We should leave as soon as possible." Bai Feng nodded. She bitterly smiled inwardly. As expected, she wasn't outstanding enough. She actually needed Chin Yu to remind her of such a simple matter. It seemed that her honorable master was right not to approve of her relationship with junior apprentice Sister Peach. The circle became even deeper. "Senior apprentice brother, please." Bai Feng took a deep breath and turned to leave. Chin Yu paused for a moment. Then he lifted a foot and stomped down. The ground violently shook. A shockwave visible to the naked eye swept through the surroundings, erasing all traces of what had happened. Bai Feng stiffened. She didn't even realize something as simple as cleaning up the battlefield and erasing all traces. The circle was so deep that she couldn't see the bottom. After a moment, the two of them stood facing each other. Chin Yu cupped his hands together and said, "Third senior apprentice brother, I followed the orders of my honorable master to secretly enter the Lost Garden. I didn't mean to hide anything." Bai Feng nodded. "Little junior apprentice brother, there is no need to explain. Since it was honorable master's arrangement, there must be a reason for it." He hesitated for a moment and then took a deep breath. He said, "When the joyous news of little junior apprentice brother and junior apprentice Sister Peach spread out, I just happened to be in seclusion. If there was any place where I was rude, I asked little junior apprentice brother to forgive me." Although there was bitterness in his words, there was a bit of apology in them, as well as a bit of sincerity. This, Chin Yu was truly shocked. He never imagined that Bai Feng would mention this matter on his own initiative, and with such an attitude at that. Why did he feel as if he had accepted it? Was this real or fake? Could it be that he was just putting on a facade and plotting something in the dark? One couldn't blame Chin Yu for overthinking things. In such a short period of time, the change in Bai Feng's attitude was far too great. Before this, he had been in seclusion, and now he was congratulating him. Even with Chin Yu's intelligence, he absolutely couldn't imagine how many thoughts had passed through Bai Feng's mind in such a short period of time. How many times had he denied himself? How many times had he strangely thought that Peach Girl should have been with Chin Yu? This was the human heart. Not only was it difficult to fathom, but it was even more difficult to grasp. Sensing Chin Yu's change in complexion, Bai Feng coughed. "Before, I didn't clearly judge my own position and position. This matter is the choice of the garden master and junior apprentice Sister Peach Girl. So what qualifications do I have to question them? After all, junior apprentice Sister Peach Girl and I have never had anything between us. Moreover, junior apprentice brother has already used your actions to prove that you are indeed more qualified than I am to protect junior apprentice Sister Peach Girl." Chin Yu wanted to say, "Third senior apprentice brother, did you make a mistake?" Just now, I was sighing with emotion that the difference in strength between us was too great. I was afraid that you would settle accounts with me afterwards. But how could things suddenly turn out like this? But he held himself back. There were some words that were best kept in his heart. No matter what the reason was, wasn't it fine as long as the result was what he wanted? Chin Yu cupped his hands together and bowed. "I knew that senior apprentice brother Bai Feng is a broad-minded person. You definitely won't be estranged from me. Bai Feng nodded. Of course. You and I are both disciples of Peach Garden, and we share the same breath. There is no reason for us to be estranged. Qin Yu felt relieved. He could conclude that Bai Feng's words were sincere. Suddenly, he felt as if he had inexplicably passed a trial. He was secretly delighted. Perhaps it was because Bai Feng had let go of the obsession in his heart after saying these words, and the normal Bai Feng finally returned. He pondered for a moment and said in a deep voice, "Little junior brother, do you remember who participated in the formation to kill me?" Qin Yu understood his meaning. Two people escaped. One of them was that cultivator surnamed Zhang. Although he doesn't speak much, this array formation should have come from him. Bai Feng lightly said, "When I saw this array formation, I already guessed it. In an accident in the past, I accidentally injured his wife and child. I've tolerated it over and over again, but that's fine. Once the matter of the Lost Garden comes to an end, I will bring this matter to a close." "Who is the second person junior apprentice brother mentioned?" Qin Yu said, "Dragon Peak, the son of the half-step saint of Dragon Mountain." Bai Feng furrowed his eyebrows, a thoughtful look on his face. "The half-step saint of Dragon Mountain. I heard that he only has one son, but he has been naughty and mischievous since childhood, and his cultivation is mediocre." As he spoke, he glanced at Qin Yu. "Junior apprentice brother seems to be a bit afraid of this person," Qin Yu said in a low voice. "Although I haven't had much contact with Dragon Peak, and I don't know what he is like, if you meet him in the future, third senior apprentice brother must be careful. This person is not ordinary." At this time, Qin Yu's weight in Bai Feng's heart was much greater than before. He didn't dare to be careless with such a serious warning. "Thank you for the reminder, junior apprentice brother. I will remember it." Bai Feng nodded with a dignified expression. Qin Yu said, "Third senior apprentice brother, do we need to?" He gestured with his hand. Bai Feng thought for a moment and said, "There is no need to force it. If there is a chance, we can help them. Even if they can leave this place alive, they won't dare to say anything. Otherwise, even if you or I don't do anything, others won't forgive them. After all, so many people attacked together, and only the two of them survived. There is no way they can wash this clean." Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "Third senior apprentice brother is wise and farsighted." Bai Feng bitterly smiled. "That's enough. I've already let go of what happened before. There is no need for junior apprentice brother to flatter me." He took a deep breath and let it out. "Since Honorable Master arranged for you to secretly enter the Lost Garden by yourself, I presume he must have considered it. I won't ask too much about it. Then, junior apprentice brother, I fear you will have to act alone, right?" Qin Yu nodded. It might be safer for me to act alone." Bai Feng said, "The Lost Garden is filled with dangers. 30% of it comes from cultivators and 70% from itself. There are countless ancient life forms living in this place, and there is no lack of extremely strong existences. Junior apprentice brother, you must be careful." He flipped his hand, and a white feather appeared in his palm. This feather contains a trace of ice phoenix blood essence. It can sense danger, and it can even be activated at a critical moment to summon an ice phoenix phantom to help junior apprentice brother block 1 or 2 attacks. Don't decline. Just take it as my apology to you for going into seclusion before." Qin Yu thought for a moment. He bowed and received the feather with both hands. "Thank you, third senior apprentice brother." Bai Feng laughed. "Good, straightforward and efficient. This is the style that junior apprentice brother of my peach garden should have. I will be leaving first. I hope that when we meet again, junior apprentice brother will have an even more amazing performance." She turned and left. Her figure flickered, and she vanished from sight. Qin Yu stood up. After a moment of silence, he revealed a faint smile. The disciples of Peach Garden were indeed different from others. This third senior apprentice brother of his was also an interesting person. To be able to pick up and let go. These words were easy to say, but looking at the boundless world, how many husbands could do this? But just what was the reason for Bai Feng's sudden change? Qin Yu rubbed his chin. He really couldn't figure it out. Forget it. If it was something he couldn't figure out and it wasn't too important, then he would just let it be. Chinyu looked up to determine the direction. After confirming with the old turtle, his figure moved far away. Because of Bai Feng's matter, he had already been delayed for some time. He didn't know if his target had been discovered ahead of time. Chapter 1260. His luck wasn't bad. The target he chose was still here. After killing off the crimson snake that spat out fire, Chinyu continued to dig in the deepest part of its cave. Finally, he made a discovery. Looking at the deep green in front of him, although it wasn't too thick, Chinyu was already incomparably satisfied. It had to be known that this was the Lost Garden, a world of its own. It was supported by the will of a powerful ancient life form, and even the Saint Tao couldn't enter. It wasn't just because the Saint Tao was strong enough to pose an intense threat to the bloodline descendants of the Lost Garden. The more important reason was that the Saint Tao possessed an incomparably formidable perception ability. It was possible that they could break through the concealment of the Lost Garden's aura and lock onto the source of life. If this were true, then the peak ancient life form had paid an astonishing price to ensure that their bloodline could continue, but all of that would have been for someone else. Thus, the Saint Tao couldn't enter the Lost Garden. Thus, when people found the source of life, they had to rely on luck. For many years, this had always been the case. It wasn't that no one had tried other methods, but they had all failed. Until today, Chinyu took a deep breath, but he still couldn't completely calm the surging excitement in his heart. This was because this matter proved that the old turtle's vague senses weren't wrong. He could indeed lock onto the aura of the source of life. Chinyu, who had already absorbed the source of life, was well aware of what this meant. Because he knew, he was excited. I've struck it rich. I really struck it rich this time. If the Lost Garden could be said to be a labyrinth filled with hidden treasures, then Chinyu had now obtained a tool that could disperse the fog. Although he couldn't clearly see the entire labyrinth, and he couldn't judge just how precious the treasures were through auras, this was already more than enough. It had to be known that although this pool of life didn't seem too remarkable, it was actually an incomparably precious source of life. Even if it was the lowest grade, it was enough to cause a group of Saint Tao Circle cultivators to fight each other, not hesitating to bleed. With the help of the old turtle, Chinyu had a premonition that this trip to the Lost Garden would be a fruitful one. Cough. Master, the truth is that this isn't anything at all to my abyssal shade, but the loss of strength isn't small. I've reported it. Chinyu waved his hand, his heroic spirit soaring to the clouds. Don't worry. From now on, as long as you need anything, I will bring it all for you. This kind of old tortoise was definitely worthy of being fed and raised to be fat and strong. A little arrogant attitude, a little untamed in the heart, and some offensive thoughts. Actually, all of these didn't matter. As long as he could make good use of them and had the ability, that was enough. Chinyu felt that the limits of his tolerance towards the old turtle had risen by yet another level. The old turtle was extremely satisfied with this response. He thought that after today, his supreme status in Chinyu's heart would be unshakable. Stone Tower? Heh. A fool who still hasn't reacted after being schemed against doesn't have the qualifications to compete with me. Moreover, his position as the shadow of the abyss was as stable as Mount Tai. Chinyu was destined to listen to his every word. Although he had the title of master, the truth was that he would always be ordered around. This is the status and authority that I, the shadow of the abyss, should have. Finally, I endured the humiliation and advanced step by step. After painstakingly planning, I finally achieved this goal. Calm down. Don't get agitated. You have to maintain your composure. So it's like that. Then I'll have to trouble Master. I'm a bit tired, so I'll rest first. Master, please begin cultivating. Humph, do you see? Whatever Chinyu does now will be arranged by me. He will definitely listen without any objections. Chinyu nodded. Okay. Without hesitation, he stepped forwards and stepped into the source of life. In the next moment, the ice seal appeared once more, indicating that this place already had a master. In the distant, dark nothingness, the stone tower's consciousness was awakened once more. After determining that Qin Yu wanted it and opening the trial field of the laws once more, it was momentarily at a loss. Even in the past, there weren't many people who had the qualifications to use the trial field of the laws to cultivate. Moreover, even if they could use it, the frequency of use wasn't high. After all, not only did this place consume an astonishing amount of energy, but it also placed a considerable burden on the cultivator. The rules were invisible and tangible. If one constantly perceived, controlled, and fused with them, then as time passed, some changes would naturally occur. The requirements for a cultivator's soul and mortal body would also increase. If one couldn't satisfy these requirements, they would suffer instead. The more rules one perceived, the greater the degree of suffering. The last time Qin Yu opened the trial field of the laws hadn't been too long ago. Did this boy not want to live anymore? Wasn't he afraid that he would explode from overeating himself? Humph humph. Cultivating might feel good for a moment, but if one couldn't withstand it, they would suffer. Thinking back to Qin Yu's previous attitude towards him, the stone tower hesitated for a moment and then decided to remain silent. This time, he had to properly watch Qin Yu make a fool of himself. Didn't you want me to open the trial field of the laws? Sure, as long as I provided enough energy, I could open it until the end of time without a problem. Let's see if you'll come beg me later. The stone tower regained its composure. The trial field of the laws opened, and Qin Yu's consciousness instantly entered. He sneered. He waited. He waited for a long time. He waited for a long time. He was fine. From start to finish, Qin Yu's performance was smooth and easy. Moreover, the speed at which he perceived the rules seemed to be even faster than before. How is this possible? The stone tower found this hard to believe. After a moment of hesitation, it consumed some strength to sense Qin Yu's condition. Then, the stone tower was stunned. Source of life? It was actually another source of life. No wonder this boy Qin Yu could crazily perceive the rules. No wonder he could easily withstand it. But when did something like a source of life become cabbages on the side of the road that could be casually picked up? Cabbages certainly couldn't be cabbages. Even after 1,000,000 years passed, a source of life was still a source of life. Then, there was only one explanation. The stone tower looked up at the heavens. Of course, this was only a description. You couldn't ask a tower to look up. Luck. Besides some heaven-defying dogshit luck, the stone tower couldn't think of how Qin Yu could find two sources of life in such a short period of time. Although he didn't want to admit it, he had lived for a long time and naturally knew more than others. For a fellow like Qin Yu with such ridiculous luck, as long as he didn't court death, he would have considerable achievements in the future. In other words, it was highly likely that the stone tower would never be able to escape Qin Yu's demonic clutches, much less be able to make a comeback. Realizing this, the stone tower instantly withered. It felt that its future was doomed to be bleak and bleak. But then again, Qin Yu was its master, and he was becoming increasingly strong. There would come a day when others would learn of his relationship with this dark region. Well, even if Qin Yu didn't admit it, would anyone believe him? The stone tower didn't think so. In other words, this boy was already tied together with it. He even had no choice but to help it carry the burden on its shoulders. Thinking of this, the stone tower suddenly felt as if it had drilled out of the water and was taking a deep breath. How many years had it been? Although it didn't want to admit it, those matters and those people would eventually come to an end. In the past, the stone tower didn't know what it should do or how far it could go. But now, there seemed to be a better choice. It could hide in the dark and let Qin Yu take the lead. But the premise was that this boy had to become strong enough. Otherwise, as soon as he appeared, he would be smashed to pieces by the raging storm. That's right, that's how it was. The stone tower was excited. It felt that it was far too smart. That bastard brat Qin Yu had always been disrespectful to it. But that doesn't matter. From now on, even if you don't take the initiative to ask me, I will still do my best to help you become stronger. In an ignorant state, you've already been schemed against. Come and have a taste of it, young man. Things like the trial field of the laws were also divided into grades. After obtaining energy, one could open it. This could only be considered the most basic part. In addition, there were some additional state blessings. For instance, it could make one's mind clearer and allow one to perceive the rules faster. Of course, this came with an additional price. Originally, with the Stone Tower's mentality, it shouldn't have even thought about these things. But now, it clenched its teeth and a sharp light surged in its eyes. As the saying went, if one didn't sacrifice the child, one couldn't catch the wolf. If one didn't pay, how could there be any return? Chinyu, today I will help you and make you feel even better. When you learn the truth later, don't blame me, right? After all, everything I do is for your own good, and you didn't refuse me? That's right, that's how it is. I am simply too smart. It was still the same as when he was in the God-forgetting gorge. Chinyu stood in front of the stone wall of the laws and suddenly blinked. Why did he suddenly feel his mind become clearer? Moreover, these rules seemed much simpler than before. He carefully looked again. He took a deep breath and looked again. This wasn't an illusion. It wasn't because he had perceived too many rules that there was a deviation in his soul perception. Chinyu carefully sensed his surroundings. He determined that there was nothing wrong with this change. Then, there didn't seem to be anything to hesitate about, right? Perhaps it was because the quality of this source of life was higher. Time was precious. Cultivation time was especially precious right now. Chinyu suppressed all his thoughts. He looked at the stone wall with rapt attention. A sharp light surged in his eyes, seeming to reflect the endless sea of stars. The old turtle's complexion changed. He could feel a strength coming from the stone tower. Thus, he discovered that he seemed to have underestimated this fellow. It was actually able to directly interfere with the soul and provide a powerful acceleration ability for Chinyu's cultivation. With Chinyu's current desire for cultivation, once he learned of this matter, he would surely place great importance on the stone tower. In other words, this stone tower that he didn't even place in his eyes at all actually had a chance to turn things around. No, absolutely not. He was the dignified shadow of the abyss. He vowed to control Chinyu in his hands. So how could he allow others to interfere? But why didn't the stone tower display this ability before and instead waited until now? As the old turtle thought about it, his complexion changed. He clenched his teeth and cursed inwardly. This damn tower, it must have seen Chinyu's potential and wanted to pick the peaches. Yes, that must be it. It was because he had found two sources of life in a row, and also because his strength was rapidly transforming. But this bastard, all of the credit was his. If it weren't for him, the dignified shadow of the abyss, would there be the current Chinyu? Now, this tower actually jumped out to compete with him for leadership. This was simply a crime worthy of death. If this were the abyss, would he be able to crush you with a single thought? Of course not. Moreover, the feeling that the stone tower gave the old turtle wasn't so simple. If he attacked him, there might be other problems. Thus, fighting him head-on wasn't the best plan. Since he couldn't destroy the enemy physically, he could only compete fairly and display his abilities. I am the dignified shadow of the abyss that has lived for countless years. I possess the two great virtues of caution, and I have also established an omnipotent image in Chinyu's mind. How could I possibly fear you? Strategically, we can look down on the enemy. But tactically, we must go all out. The old turtle began to think. He originally couldn't figure out why the stone tower chose to remain silent after helping Chinyu. No, it wasn't just silence. There was even a bit of deliberate concealment. Why was this? If this bastard was said to be of noble character and unquestionable integrity, to help others without asking for anything in return, the old turtle didn't believe a single word of it. No, he didn't believe a single word of it. The reason he didn't say anything was because he was waiting for Chinyu to discover it on his own. This sort of wholeheartedly helping him, but not telling him, was high, absolutely high. Chinyu would definitely be moved. Perhaps because of the guilt in his heart, he would magnify this feeling. In comparison, the old turtle suddenly realized that what he had done before did not seem to be enough. Not only was it not enough, but it was far worse. The old turtle rejoiced. Luckily, he had always adhered to the two great virtues of caution and never dared to slack off. He had discovered this fellow's plot early on and hadn't given him a chance to move any further. If he could adjust his strategy, there was still time. It seemed that he couldn't change his attitude towards Chinyu too much in the future. At the very least, he had to pay more attention before subduing the stone tower. Also, that bastard stone tower, he was actually able to help Chinyu cultivate. Although he could do the same, he needed a crushing advantage in order to establish his supreme status. Luckily, this was the Lost Garden, and what Chinyu cared about the most right now was his source of life. This was the key to his rapid transformation of strength. Hum, and I, the shadow of the abyss, and the great existence that can help him find his source of life. Just this point alone placed him in an invincible position. He would search now. Not only did he have to find his source of life, but he also had to find a higher quality one. He had to make Chinyu firmly remember that only by following the great shadow of the abyss could he walk further and walk faster. However, strengthening one's sensing ability and selecting the grade of one source of life would increase the consumption by a great deal. In the end, the old turtle was an extreme character that feared the death world. When it came to the consumption of strength, and strength itself was the foundation of his survival, he instinctively hesitated. But this hesitation only lasted for a brief moment before it was suppressed. If he couldn't sacrifice the child to catch the wolf, then he would do it. The old turtle didn't know that the stone tower had also had this thought not too long ago. But besides this point, their thoughts were completely different. The stone tower didn't think too much about it. It simply didn't want Chinyu to know that it was he who had helped him. Like this, a misunderstanding had occurred. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.